Imagine a time when the world was young, when empires had yet to rise, and the very first whispers of civilization were etched into stone and bronze. Over 5,000 years ago, long before the great libraries of Greece or Rome, there existed a world both familiar and alien, a world where myths and reality blurred, where sacred rituals, lost technologies, and enigmatic monuments stood as silent witnesses to a past we still struggle to understand. The Bronze Age, beginning around 3,300 BC, was a turning point in human history. The dawn of metallurgy, the birth of complex cities, and the rise of powerful cultures across Mesopotamia, Egypt, Anatolia, and Palestine. Yet with every discovery, new questions emerge. Why do certain artifacts seem centuries ahead of their time? What secrets were encoded in the cryptic carvings of temples and tombs? And why do some ruins feel as though they were built not just for humans, but for something otherworldly? These are not just relics of a forgotten era. They are mysteries that still have the power to unsettle us today. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the chilling enigmas of the Bronze Age. The sun sets over the ruins of once mighty cities, their stones still warm from the day's heat, and yet eerily silent. Picture the sprawling ruins of Ugarit, at the edge of what is now northern Syria, or the abandoned palaces of Mycenae in Greece. Once vibrant centers of trade, art, and political power, now reduced to crumbling walls and scattered fragments of pottery. In Palestine, coastal settlements that once thrived on maritime commerce sit deserted, their docks eroded and their granaries empty. These are not isolated tragedies. Across the eastern Mediterranean, from the Nile Delta to Anatolia, from Crete to the Levantine coast, an inexplicable pattern emerges. The sudden, near-simultaneous collapse of entire civilizations at the end of the 13th and early 12th centuries BC. Archaeologists have traced the conventional threads of this catastrophe: drought, famine, social unrest, and invasions by mysterious groups collectively known as the Sea People's skeletal remains suggest malnutrition and conflict. Charred ruins speak of cities consumed by fire. Clay tablets record pleas to distant kings for aid that never came. It seems on the surface that a perfect storm of natural disasters and human upheaval brought the late Bronze Age world to its knees. Yet as we examine the evidence more closely, contradictions emerge. Why did some cities survive relatively intact while others, separated by only a few hundred kilometers, vanished entirely? Why do certain inscriptions hint at sudden evacuations rather than prolonged sieges? Take, for instance, the Palace of Hattusa, the Hittite capital. Its walls, designed to withstand armies, bear signs not only of violent destruction, but also of meticulous abandonment. Temples and archives were left untouched, as if the city's inhabitants had vanished overnight, leaving behind treasures that invaders could not, or did not, take. In Palestine, coastal settlements show similar anomalies: burnt layers overlaid on perfectly preserved streets, suggesting a sudden, devastating event, yet with evidence that some daily life, markets, workshops, domestic routines, continued up to the very brink of disaster. Scholars have long debated the causes. Climatic studies indicate prolonged droughts, possibly triggered by volcanic eruptions or shifts in ocean currents, leading to crop failures across the region. Some researchers point to economic collapse. The intricate web of trade in tin, copper, and luxury goods that connected Mycenae, Ugarit, Egypt, and Anatolia may have been so delicate that a single disruption, piracy, war, or political instability could unravel it entirely. The Sea Peoples, enigmatic raiders whose origins remain uncertain, are often blamed for hastening the decline. Yet their sudden appearance in Egyptian inscriptions raises more questions than answers. Were they opportunistic marauders, displaced populations, or perhaps remnants of failed states seeking survival in foreign lands. Beyond these mainstream explanations lie more speculative theories. Could seismic activity or tsunamis have contributed to the destruction of coastal cities? Geological evidence along the Levantine coast hints at sudden shifts in the shoreline and sediment deposits that may correspond to catastrophic flooding. Some researchers have even proposed systemic societal collapse, driven by internal strife, a kind of chain reaction in which centralized authority disintegrates under pressure, causing trade networks to fail and local communities to collapse. And while there is no direct evidence for it, one cannot ignore the eerie pattern. Civilizations spanning thousands of kilometers, separated by seas and mountains, all crumbling within the same few decades. The synchronicity seems almost unnatural. The material remnants themselves are haunting. Broken figurines, abandoned tools, and shattered pottery suggest lives interrupted in the middle of daily routines. Tablets from Ugarit record diplomatic messages, pleas, negotiations, warnings, written in the final months before the city's fall, as though its scribes sensed an approaching doom they could not prevent. In Palestine, the remains of coastal fortifications show signs of hurried reinforcement, hastily erected walls that ultimately failed. Archaeologists walk these sites today with the quiet awareness that, for some reason, societies capable of monumental architecture, complex governance, and sophisticated trade simply cease to function almost simultaneously. Even with modern technology, satellite imagery, dendrochronology, isotopic analysis, we cannot fully reconstruct the events that brought down this intricate world. The Bronze Age collapse is not merely a historical footnote. It is a profound reminder of fragility. A system that seemed stable, powerful, and eternal was undone in a generation, leaving behind questions that continue to challenge our understanding of human resilience. What forces, natural, human, or otherwise, could have created such a widespread upheaval? How did some communities survive while others disappeared entirely? As we wander among the remnants of these ancient civilizations, one cannot help but feel a sense of disquiet. The collapse is tangible in the ruins, yet intangible in its causes. Every artifact, every charred wall, every abandoned settlement whispers hints of what was lost, but never the full story. It is a mystery that sits at the intersection of science, history, and the unknown, a puzzle that continues to provoke curiosity, speculation, and wonder. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the Bronze Age collapse is not the destruction itself, but the questions it leaves behind. Questions about human society, about our relationship with the environment, and about the hidden forces that shape the fate of civilizations. And as we trace the silent echoes of these vanished cities, we are reminded that some mysteries of the ancient world may never be fully solved, forever suspended between fact and imagination, history and the unexplained. As the waves crash against the jagged coastlines of the eastern Mediterranean, one can almost imagine the long shadows of ancient ships cutting through the morning mist. Ports that once thrived with bustling trade, Ugarit, Byblos, and the harbors along the southern Levant, now lie in ruins, silent witnesses to the chaos that swept through the region more than 3,000 years ago. Among the many enigmas of the Bronze Age collapse, none has captured the imagination of historians quite like the Sea Peoples, a confounding coalition of maritime raiders whose sudden appearance changed the course of civilizations. Egyptian inscriptions, most famously those at Medinet Habu in Thebes, depict fleets of unfamiliar ships, shields raised, warriors advancing in coordinated formation. The reliefs are striking in their detail. Helmets, crescent-shaped shields, and long, plaited hairstyles that differ from the Egyptian soldiers who carved them. Yet the images offer only partial insight. We see the attackers' armor and weapons, but their origins, motivations, and ultimate fates remain shrouded in uncertainty. Were they displaced tribes seeking new lands, mercenaries turning against their former employers, or a collection of disparate groups united by circumstance rather than culture? Mainstream scholarship often portrays the Sea Peoples as the catalysts for the widespread destruction that accompanied the Bronze Age collapse. Cities along the Levantine coast, in Anatolia, and even as far west as Crete and Cyprus suffered extensive damage during their raids. Archaeological layers reveal charred buildings, abandoned workshops, and mass graves. Yet even here, the story is incomplete. Some fortified settlements survived assaults that obliterated neighboring towns. Trade networks, though fractured, continued in unexpected pockets. These inconsistencies suggest a phenomenon far more complex than a simple wave of invaders sweeping unchecked across the Mediterranean. Recent studies have sought to ground these events in environmental and economic realities. Climatic shifts may have caused severe droughts, reducing agricultural yields and forcing populations to seek new resources elsewhere. The disruption of trade in tin and copper, the very metals that fueled the Bronze Age, could have left communities vulnerable, unable to maintain fortifications or armies. Some scholars suggest that the Sea Peoples were, in part, the displaced victims of such upheavals. Groups forced from their homelands by famine, internal conflict, or natural disasters, moving along coastal routes in search of survival. Yet even these plausible explanations leave gaps. Egyptian accounts, while invaluable, are inherently biased, celebrating the pharaoh's victories and framing the invaders as foreign and destructive. Beyond the inscriptions, we find tantalizing hints in fragmented records from Ugarit and other Levantine cities, pleas for aid, sudden abandonments, and sudden disruptions in trade. The Sea Peoples appear not merely as raiders, but as agents of profound societal transformation, their movements coinciding with the collapse of some of the era's most sophisticated political structures. Speculation grows when we examine the names associated with these groups: Peliset, Shurden, Shekelesh, Denyen, and Weshesh. Linguists and historians have long debated their identities, connecting them to regions across the Aegean, Anatolia, and even Sicily. Yet these connections are tentative at best, a puzzle made more complicated by the lack of consistent evidence. Could they have been mercenaries, mercilessly loyal only to opportunity? Or perhaps remnants of older societies, displaced by conflicts now lost to time, seeking to reclaim or redefine their place in a rapidly changing world? Archaeological discoveries add layers to the mystery. Excavations in southern Anatolia reveal burned settlements alongside evidence of continued habitation, suggesting that attacks may not have been purely destructive, but selectively strategic. In Palestine, coastal sites show abrupt abandonment, yet with traces of valuable cargo left behind, almost as if the raiders had specific targets rather than indiscriminately plundering. These details challenge the traditional narrative of the Sea Peoples as simple marauders. Were they part of a complex network of political pressures, migration, and opportunistic warfare? Or do these patterns hint at something we cannot yet comprehend? Forces at play that combined human agency with environmental instability in ways we are only beginning to perceive. The Sea Peoples also invite us to consider the limits of our knowledge. Unlike the Egyptians, who documented history in meticulous detail, the lands from which the Sea Peoples originated left few records. Without written accounts, we rely on fragments of pottery, the orientation of ruins, and subtle patterns in material culture to reconstruct their movements. And yet, every fragment raises further questions. Why did they disappear as suddenly as they emerged? How could such a significant force leave almost no trace beyond the destruction attributed to it? Walking through the remnants of these ancient coastal cities today, it is easy to sense the human dimensions of this mystery. Families abandoning homes, merchants abandoning markets, soldiers facing invaders whose motives remain unknown. The Sea Peoples are more than historical actors. They are symbols of the unknown forces that shape human destiny. They challenge our understanding of migration, warfare, and societal collapse. And perhaps most hauntingly, they remind us that history is never fully written. Its gaps, silences, and anomalies are as telling as the records themselves. So we are left with questions that endure. Who were the Sea Peoples, really? Were they conquerors, refugees, or something entirely different? An echo of a world in transition, a force of chaos reshaping the Mediterranean? The ruins, the inscriptions, the burned streets, they offer clues, but no definitive answers. And it is in this uncertainty, in this lingering tension between what is known and what remains hidden, that the Sea Peoples continue to captivate the imagination, leaving us to wonder what other truths of the Bronze Age still lie buried waiting to be discovered. The plain of Hisarlik stretches beneath the sun, its rolling hills dotted with the ruins of walls, fortifications, and the faint outlines of streets long buried beneath centuries of soil and debris. In the Bronze Age, this site, what later generations would call Troy, stood as a formidable city, a center of trade and culture at the crossroads of the Aegean and Anatolian worlds. Today, it is both monument and mystery, a place where the line between legend and history blurs, and where echoes of fire and war seem to linger in the wind. The Trojan War, immortalized in the epic poems of Homer, tells of kings and heroes, of betrayal, love, and vengeance. Yet behind the poetry lies an archaeological record that is far less certain, yet no less compelling. Excavations at Hisarlik reveal layers of settlement spanning centuries, with evidence of violent destruction at various points, particularly around the late 13th and early 12th centuries B.C., coinciding with the wider turmoil of the collapsing Bronze Age world. Burnt palaces, collapsed fortifications, and hurriedly abandoned homes suggest sieges that left the city fractured and scarred. But the causes, participants, and even the scale of such conflicts remain tantalizingly elusive. Traditional interpretations often frame Troy as the prize in a struggle between Mycenaean Greeks and Anatolian powers, a tale of rivalry over trade routes and political influence. Archaeologists note the city's strategic location, a gateway between the Mediterranean and inland Anatolia, commanding access to both commerce and military movements. The remains of massive walls, carefully laid masonry, and complex urban planning hint at a city built not just for trade, but for defense, a city prepared for the possibility of war. Yet even with these tangible clues, the human stories behind the stones are lost. Who commanded the defenders? Who fell in the streets? How much of the Homeric narrative, with its heroes and divine interventions, preserves memory, and how much is artistic embellishment? Intriguingly, some evidence suggests that Troy experienced not a single catastrophic event, but a series of upheavals over decades. Multiple layers of destruction are visible, sometimes separated by years or even generations of rebuilding. Could the Trojan War, as remembered in legend, have been a synthesis of several conflicts, remembered collectively as one great struggle? Or might it have been one dramatic episode within a long period of regional instability shaped by the same forces that brought down Mycenae, Ugarit, and other Bronze Age cities? Beyond the archaeological record, we encounter artifacts that hint at broader connections. Pottery and weaponry at Troy show links with both the Aegean and Anatolia, reflecting a city deeply enmeshed in the networks of trade and diplomacy that characterized the Bronze Age. Some scholars suggest that the legendary treasures described in the epics, a golden hecatomb of wealth, priceless jewelry, and exotic goods, may correspond to these real exchanges, now fragmented into shards of ceramic and twisted bronze. Yet why would Troy, a city capable of such wealth, ultimately fall? Was it the calculated assault of Mycenaean armies, the internal collapse of the city's elite, or a convergence of forces, both natural and human, beyond any single ruler's control? Speculative theories add further layers to the enigma. Some researchers point to seismic activity in the region, suggesting earthquakes may have weakened the city's walls or caused sudden devastation, later remembered as the thunderous siege of legend. Others consider the impact of regional migrations and raiding parties, possibly including groups like the Sea Peoples, whose movements disrupted settlements across the eastern Mediterranean. Could Troy's destruction have been less the result of a protracted battle, and more the consequence of a broader chain reaction of violence and displacement? Even the geography itself raises questions. The plain of Yazılıkaya, as it exists today, differs from its Bronze Age form. Shifting coastlines, riverbeds, and sediment deposits mean that trade routes and harbors that once made the city vital may have already been under environmental stress. Were the city's defenses, impressive in their construction, ultimately compromised by forces beyond human control? Floods, droughts, or shifting land? If so, how did the interplay of nature and human ambition shape the events that generations later would be immortalized in epic verse? Walking among the ruins now, the mind can wander freely between fact and imagination. The echoes of conflict seem embedded in the very stones, yet the full story remains elusive. Who were the actors behind the city's rise and fall? Which accounts are historical, which myth, and which a blend of the two? And perhaps most compellingly, what truths of the Bronze Age lie hidden beneath layers yet unexcavated, waiting for time and discovery to reveal them? Troy, in this sense, is both specific and universal, a single city that mirrors the mysteries of an entire era. It reminds us that even in a time of written records, monumental architecture, and sophisticated society, human history retains a stubborn opacity. As we study the city's walls, burned gates, and scattered artifacts, we are invited to wonder not just at what happened, but why, and how much we may never truly know. The Trojan War, whether as history, legend, or a mixture of both, continues to stand as one of the Bronze Age's most enduring and chilling mysteries, an invitation to look deeper, question further, and imagine the lives of those who walked these streets more than 3,000 years ago. The sun rises over the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, its rays glinting off the remnants of baked brick streets and the faint outlines of granaries that once stored the lifeblood of a civilization. The city stretches in careful, geometric precision, a testament to urban planning and engineering that seems astonishing even by modern standards. Canals, wells, and drainage systems still hint at a society deeply attuned to the rhythms of water and life. Yet as we wander these silent avenues, we are confronted by a stark truth. The people who built this city, who crafted its seals, standardized its weights, and mastered the art of urban design, vanished nearly overnight, leaving behind only whispers of their existence. The Indus Valley civilization, which thrived from around 3,300 to 1,300 BC, was among the earliest and most sophisticated urban cultures of the ancient world. Stretching across what is now northern India and Pakistan, it included major cities like Harappa, Dholavira, and Mohenjo-Daro, each connected by trade networks spanning hundreds of kilometers. Archaeologists have uncovered a society remarkably organized. Streets laid out in grids, uniform bricks, advanced drainage, and a system of weights and measures that suggests centralized administration. Yet, despite these achievements, the Indus script remains undeciphered, and the details of their daily lives, political systems, and beliefs are largely hidden from us. Around 1900 BC, the signs of decline begin to appear. Cities were abandoned, granaries left untouched, and trade networks gradually fractured. Evidence suggests a reduction in population, the degradation of urban infrastructure, and a sudden shift in settlement patterns. Yet the causes of this disappearance remain mysterious. Mainstream explanations often point to environmental changes, shifting river courses, monsoon failures, or severe droughts may have undermined agriculture and destabilized the urban centers. Geological studies of the Indus River and its tributaries indicate that some settlements were suddenly cut off from their water sources, a scenario that could have forced mass migration and societal collapse. However, environmental factors alone may not tell the full story. Signs of conflict and fortifications suggest that human pressures, raids, internal uprisings, or competition for dwindling resources may also have played a role. Some scholars propose that a combination of ecological stress and social strain created a tipping point in which cities once thought invulnerable could no longer sustain their populations. Yet, even this theory leaves unanswered questions. Why did some towns persist in limited form, while the great cities, centers of trade and culture, were completely abandoned? What decisions did these people make in the face of catastrophe, and what traces of their survival strategies remain hidden beneath layers of soil? Speculative theories add further intrigue. Could disease have played a role, striking dense urban populations and weakening the social fabric? Were there migrations or invasions from neighboring regions, perhaps similar to the movements of the sea peoples in the Mediterranean, that disrupted trade and security? Some suggest that the collapse of the Indus cities may have been part of a wider pattern of instability affecting multiple civilizations across Asia and the Middle East. Connections in trade goods, metallurgy, and cultural motifs hint at a world in flux, a network of societies vulnerable to cascading failures that no single city could withstand. Archaeological discoveries continue to confound and fascinate. The uniformity of bricks and weights suggests a highly centralized system, yet no palaces or grand temples have been identified, an absence that raises questions about the social and political organization of the Indus people. Seals carved with mysterious symbols, often depicting animals and enigmatic figures, provide tantalizing glimpses of their beliefs, but remain undeciphered. How did such a sophisticated civilization vanish without leaving clear records of kings, wars, or decrees? And why did their knowledge of urban planning, engineering, and standardized trade practices disappear along with them, seemingly lost to history? Even the landscape itself speaks to the unknown. Excavations reveal abandoned wells, crumbling walls, and remnants of streets aligned with precision, yet slowly being reclaimed by the earth. In some areas, layers of sediment suggest sudden flooding, while in others, evidence points to gradual desiccation. Could the Indus Valley's disappearance have been the result of multiple overlapping crises, environmental, social, and economic, unfolding simultaneously? Or might there be factors we have yet to discover, subtle forces hidden in the archaeological record that could change our understanding entirely? Walking among the remnants of Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa today, one feels a sense of both awe and melancholy. Here was a civilization capable of extraordinary feats, yet one whose fate remains enigmatic. Their disappearance challenges our assumptions about the resilience of urban societies and the permanence of human achievement. The Indus Valley civilization reminds us that even the most sophisticated cities can vanish, leaving only fragments and questions for those who come after. And so we are left to wonder, what truly caused the fall of this ancient civilization? Was it the slow hand of environmental change, sudden upheaval, social unrest, or a combination of all? Are there truths buried beneath these cities, still waiting to be uncovered? As we continue to piece together the story, the mystery endures, inviting us to consider not only the Indus people's fate, but also the fragile, fleeting nature of human societies throughout history. The sun glints off the white stone terraces of Knossos, the largest of the Minoan palaces on Crete, illuminating frescoes of dolphins, bulls, and twisting labyrinthine patterns that once adorned its walls. The corridors and grand halls, carefully excavated over a century ago, still whisper of a civilization that flourished in splendor and sophistication, whose reach extended across the Aegean. Traders, artisans, and priests moved through these spaces centuries ago, yet today, silence dominates, broken only by the gentle wind sweeping over the ruins. It is a city frozen in time, and yet it is a city that vanished. Its collapse a lingering mystery that continues to intrigue scholars and explorers alike. The Minoans, flourishing from roughly 3000 to 1450 BC, were remarkable for their artistry, maritime prowess, and intricate urban planning. Palaces like Knossos, Phaistos, and Mallia were centers of administration, religion, and trade. Advanced plumbing, elaborate storage facilities, and vibrant frescoes point to a society both wealthy and sophisticated, capable of remarkable engineering feats. Yet by the mid-15th century BC, the Minoan world was shaken. Cities were burned or abandoned, trade networks faltered, and the civilization that had dominated the Aegean for centuries entered a period of sudden decline. The question remains, what caused such a flourishing society to unravel? Mainstream explanations often point to natural disasters. The eruption of the Thera volcano on the nearby island of Santorini was catastrophic, sending shockwaves of ash, fire, and tsunami across the eastern Mediterranean. Archaeological layers show destruction at several Minoan sites, suggesting that earthquakes, tsunamis, and climate disruptions may have undermined urban centers and destabilized agriculture. Could such natural forces alone have brought down a civilization that had thrived for generations? Or were they merely the opening act in a more complex drama? Evidence also hints at human factors. Signs of violence and destruction suggest that invaders may have exploited the chaos wrought by natural disasters. The Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, who appear to take control of Crete around this time, left traces of their presence in architecture and burial practices. Yet the transition is not entirely clear. Was it conquest, gradual assimilation, or a combination of both? The Minoans, despite their sophistication, may have been vulnerable to external pressures in ways their palaces and fortifications could not mitigate. Speculative theories extend the mystery further. Could climate shifts, beyond the immediate impact of Thera, have contributed to crop failures and societal strain? Did prolonged droughts or changing weather patterns weaken the foundation of Minoan prosperity, forcing migrations or economic collapse? Some researchers suggest that internal social upheaval, competition among elites, disruption of trade monopolies, or rebellion within cities may have compounded the effects of natural catastrophes. The evidence is subtle, fragmentary, yet persistent, suggesting that multiple pressures converged to unravel the Minoan world. Artifacts from this period add layers to the enigma. Frescoes depicting ritual bull leaping, delicate pottery, and inscribed tablets in Linear A and Linear B hint at cultural continuity even amid decline. Yet, Linear A, still undeciphered, leaves much of their political and religious life shrouded in mystery. How did their belief systems, economic structures, and governance adapt, or fail to adapt, to the challenges they faced? Were there efforts to rebuild that ultimately faltered, or did entire communities abandon the island entirely, leaving behind only the echoes of daily life captured in ceramics and wall paintings? The geography of Crete itself plays a role in this mystery. Rugged mountains, fertile plains, and a jagged coastline made the island both defensible and vulnerable. Ports that had once linked the Minoans to Egypt, Anatolia, and the Levant became less secure, susceptible to the same disruptions that were affecting distant civilizations like the Indus Valley or Troy. Trade, the lifeblood of the Minoan economy, may have collapsed under the combined weight of environmental disaster, piracy, and regional instability. Could the fall of distant trading partners have triggered a chain reaction, sending shockwaves across the Aegean that the Minoans could not withstand? Walking through the ruins today, one senses both ingenuity and fragility. The corridors of Knossos, the colonnaded courtyards, and the remnants of storage magazines tell of a people capable of extraordinary feats, yet ultimately vulnerable to forces, natural, human, or perhaps both, beyond their control. Their disappearance raises questions not only about the end of their civilization, but about the fragility of any society, no matter how advanced or prosperous. And so the Minoan Collapse remains an open puzzle. Was it Thera's eruption, foreign invasion, climate stress, internal social upheaval, or a combination of factors we have yet to fully understand? How did a civilization so advanced, so intricately organized, vanish almost entirely from the historical record? As we trace the remnants of walls, frescoes, and artifacts, we are left with a profound sense of wonder and uncertainty, a reminder that even the brightest civilizations can fade, leaving only questions for future generations to ponder. In a quiet forest near the town of Nebra, in what is now modern Germany, a small hill rises gently from the surrounding plains. Beneath its surface, nearly 4 millennia ago, something extraordinary was buried. A disk of bronze, no larger than a dinner plate, yet inscribed with a celestial map that continues to confound scholars. The Nebra Sky Disk, as it is now called, gleams with gold inlays depicting the sun, moon, and a scattering of stars, including a cluster believed to represent the Pleiades. In the dim light of its discovery, it is almost impossible not to feel the presence of those who first lifted it from the earth, aware of the night sky in ways that still challenge our understanding. Dating to around 1600 BC, during the height of the European Bronze Age, the disk is remarkable not only for its age, but for its sophistication. The precision with which the celestial symbols were placed suggests a profound understanding of astronomy, far beyond what one might expect from a culture typically characterized as agrarian. Scholars believe it may have been used to align rituals with the movements of the sun and moon, to track seasons, or even as a tool for coordinating trade and travel. Yet the context of its creation and use remains elusive. Who made it? For what precise purpose? And why was it deliberately buried, hidden from view for thousands of years? The discovery of the disk in 1999 sent ripples through the archaeological community. Found alongside bronze swords, axes, and spiral ornaments, it was clearly part of a ceremonial hoard, suggesting that its value extended far beyond the material. Mainstream interpretations frame the disk as a practical instrument of celestial observation, perhaps even one of the earliest star maps in Europe. Yet even this explanation leaves questions unanswered. Why create such an elaborate representation of the heavens, with gold inlays meticulously applied, if not to convey meaning beyond the ordinary? Could it have been a tool of power, a symbol of elite knowledge, or a key to ritual practices that have left no other trace? Speculation grows when we consider the disk's apparent awareness of complex astronomical phenomena. Some researchers suggest that the alignment of the sun and moon motifs could have been used to calculate the dates of solstices, allowing societies to predict seasonal shifts critical for agriculture and trade. Others point to the Pleiades cluster, which is visible in the winter sky, as evidence that the disk encoded knowledge of the year's progression. The level of astronomical precision implies careful observation over many years, yet no written records accompany it. How did Bronze Age Europeans develop such understanding without the sophisticated mathematical frameworks seen in contemporary civilizations of Mesopotamia or Egypt? The disk also raises broader questions about connections and knowledge transfer during the Bronze Age. Its construction coincides with a period of widespread trade and cultural exchange across Europe and the Mediterranean. Could knowledge of celestial patterns have traveled along these networks, influencing societies far beyond Nebra? Or was the disk the product of a localized tradition, independently developed and yet so precise it rivals the scientific capabilities of distant civilizations? The answers remain tantalizingly out of reach. Adding to the mystery is the deliberate nature of its burial. The Nebra Sky Disk was not merely lost, it was intentionally hidden. Was this an act of reverence, a ritual offering to the gods, or an attempt to preserve the knowledge contained within during times of social upheaval? The Bronze Age in Europe, though less studied than its Mediterranean contemporaries, was a period of emerging social stratification, competition, and long-distance exchange. Could the disk have been a symbol of authority, its power and knowledge restricted to a select few and hidden when political circumstances shifted? The material of the disk itself deepens the intrigue. The bronze base and gold inlays required access to distant mines, indicating networks of resource acquisition and craft specialization. Its precision suggests skilled metallurgists who understood not only the properties of metal, but also the demands of symbolic representation. In a sense, the disk embodies a convergence of art, science, and belief, a synthesis that feels both deliberate and enigmatic. Standing in the presence of the Nebra Sky Disk, one is reminded of the fragility and brilliance of Bronze Age knowledge. A single object, carefully preserved in secrecy for millennia, opens a window into the minds of people who watch the night sky with curiosity, precision, and perhaps reverence. Yet, for all we can infer, the disk does not answer its own questions. Its creators remain nameless, their intentions only partially glimpsed, their society largely obscured by time. And so, the Nebra Sky Disk continues to challenge and inspire. Was it a practical calendar, a ceremonial artifact, a map of the heavens, or all of these at once? How much of Bronze Age Europe's knowledge of astronomy, ritual, and power has been lost to time? As we study the delicate gold stars and ponder the hands that etched them into bronze, we are left with an enduring sense of wonder, and the realization that some mysteries of the ancient world remain as luminous and inscrutable as the stars themselves. High in the rugged hills of southwestern Britain, the wind whistles across ancient valleys, carrying the scent of earth and stone that has witnessed millennia of human toil. Here, in the gray, weathered outcrops of Cornwall, lie the remnants of what may have been some of the most valuable deposits of tin in the Bronze Age. Across the Mediterranean, in the mountains of Anatolia, the Iberian Peninsula, and possibly even the edges of the Arabian deserts, other deposits waited, often hidden beneath layers of soil and rock. For the people of the Bronze Age, tin was not merely a mineral, it was a lifeline. Mixed with copper, it produced bronze, the alloy that defined an era of swords, tools, and monumental achievements. Yet, despite its importance, the sources of tin and the paths by which it traveled across continents remain enigmatic. Bronze, ubiquitous across the civilizations of Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Aegean, and the Indus Valley, could not exist without tin, yet tin deposits were rare and geographically scattered. Archaeologists have traced trade networks that span thousands of kilometers, revealing a complex web connecting mines in the mountains to urban centers across Europe and the Near East. Even the Nebra Sky Disk, which we explored earlier, required access to tin for its bronze base, suggesting that societies far from the deposits themselves had the means to obtain this critical resource. But how did Bronze Age people, lacking modern surveying tools or detailed maps, locate, extract, and transport tin across such distances? Mainstream theories suggest that known tin sources, Cornwall, the Erzgebirge in Central Europe, Anatolia, and parts of modern Afghanistan, were gradually exploited and connected through trade. Merchant caravans and seafaring routes may have carried ingots of tin to Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley, enabling the proliferation of bronze tools and weapons. Yet archaeological evidence is fragmentary, often consisting of tin slag, small ingots, or references in texts that rarely specify exact locations. How did societies maintain these long-distance networks in an era without standardized currency or global communication? The scale of coordination required is staggering, particularly when one considers the political instability and environmental disruptions we've seen affecting other Bronze Age civilizations. Speculation deepens when we examine inconsistencies in the evidence. Tin artifacts have been found in regions far removed from any known sources, sometimes thousands of kilometers from the nearest mine. In some cases, the chemical composition of bronze objects does not match nearby deposits, suggesting either trade from more distant, unlocated mines, or previously unknown extraction sites that have since vanished or been forgotten. Could there have been mines lost to time, now hidden beneath centuries of sediment or cultivated land? Or did ancient societies possess knowledge of remote deposits that was carefully guarded and passed down orally, disappearing with the communities themselves? The methods of tin extraction also hint at advanced knowledge and organization. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of open-cast mining, pit digging, and early smelting techniques in areas like Cornwall and Central Europe. The work required skill, labor, and an understanding of metallurgy, as tin must be separated from its ore to create usable bronze. Yet the scale of these operations, particularly given the transportation challenges, suggests networks of coordination that rivaled those of city-states and kingdoms. Who oversaw these operations, and how were the products distributed across such vast distances? Were there elite groups controlling the trade, similar to the merchants and priestly classes responsible for other luxury goods of the era? The mystery of tin is compounded by its symbolic and strategic importance. Unlike copper, which was more widely available, tin was rare, making it a critical resource in times of war, expansion, and societal collapse. Did control over tin sources influence the rise and fall of civilizations? Could the sudden disruption of tin supply have contributed to the widespread collapses we have explored? The fall of Troy, the Minoan palaces, and the Indus Valley settlements? The fragility of these networks suggests that the loss of access to tin might have had consequences as devastating as famine or invasion. Even the routes themselves remain partly speculative. Some researchers posit maritime corridors along the Atlantic coast, riverine networks through Central Europe, and desert tracks linking Anatolia to Mesopotamia. Others suggest that overland trade involved a relay system of merchants and intermediaries, passing tin from one region to another across mountains and plains over decades of careful negotiation. How such networks were maintained in the absence of formal agreements or written contracts is a question that continues to fascinate. Standing amidst the hills of Cornwall or the highlands of Anatolia, one can sense the stakes these ancient peoples faced. Tin was both a necessity and a treasure, shaping the tools, weapons, and technologies that defined the Bronze Age. Its scarcity made it valuable, its distribution complex, and its disappearance from certain regions potentially catastrophic. The very fabric of ancient societies depended upon it, yet much about its procurement and circulation remains hidden from our view. And so, the story of tin is far from complete. Were there mines we have yet to locate? Were entire trade networks lost when civilizations fell, along with the knowledge of their operation? How did the movements of tin influence the rise, collapse, and survival of the great Bronze Age societies we have explored? from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley, from Crete to Palestine? As we trace these elusive veins of metal through time and geography, we are reminded that even the most practical materials of human history can carry with them deep and enduring mysteries, secrets that continue to glitter, waiting for those willing to follow the faint traces left behind. Beneath the turquoise waves off the southwestern coast of modern Turkey, the seafloor holds a secret that has lain undisturbed for more than 3,000 years. Here, in 1982, divers discovered the remains of a ship, its timbers encrusted with centuries of marine life, lying in the shadow of the Uluburun headland. The Uluburun Shipwreck, dated to around 1300 BC, is one of the most remarkable time capsules of the Late Bronze Age, preserving not only the hull of a vessel, but also a staggering cargo that offers a glimpse into the trade, technology, and connections of an ancient world. The ship's contents were extraordinary. Dozens of copper and tin ingots, the raw materials of bronze, lay scattered among ceramics, ivory, amber, gold jewelry, and exotic goods from across the Mediterranean and beyond. Each item tells a story of long-distance trade: copper from Cyprus, tin, likely from distant sources, amber from the Baltic, African elephant ivory, and ostrich eggshells from North Africa. The vessel itself, though modest in size, was a floating nexus of the Bronze Age economy, linking civilizations separated by hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers. Yet despite the clarity of the artifacts, the ship's story remains enigmatic. Who sailed it? From where to where? And why did it meet a sudden and watery grave? Mainstream interpretations often portray the Uluburun Shipwreck as a merchant vessel engaged in routine trade, caught in a storm or otherwise wrecked along the rugged Lycian coast. The scale and diversity of its cargo suggest a highly organized commercial system, capable of moving materials and luxury goods across great distances. Copper and tin ingots, carefully weighed and stacked, indicate precise knowledge of metallurgy and supply chains, while exotic items such as ostrich eggs and elephant tusks suggest both ambition and status. Was this ship part of a fleet supplying a powerful kingdom? Perhaps Mycenae or one of the Levantine city-states? Or was it a private venture, the livelihood of a single merchant navigating a world of both opportunity and danger? Speculation deepens when we consider the ship's cargo as evidence of broader networks. The Uluburun vessel carried items from at least 7 distinct regions, suggesting a Mediterranean world of interdependent civilizations, whose fortunes were intimately connected. Some scholars propose that the ship represents a late stage of Bronze Age globalization, a period when trade networks extended farther than we might imagine, knitting together economies from the Aegean to Egypt, Anatolia, and the Levant. Yet the suddenness of the shipwreck hints at the fragility of this system. Even the most sophisticated routes could not guarantee safety from the sea, storms, or human conflict. The construction of the ship itself raises questions about technology and knowledge. Its planks, joined with mortise and tenon techniques, indicate advanced shipbuilding skills. The careful stowage of heavy metal ingots and fragile luxury items shows an understanding of balance, weight distribution, and maritime risk management. This was not a simple coastal vessel. It was capable of navigating open seas, suggesting that Bronze Age sailors were far more skilled than often assumed. How many such ships sailed these waters, leaving no trace, lost to storms, warfare, or decay? And how did sailors manage not only the physical challenges of the sea, but the logistical complexity of transporting goods from such distant sources? The shipwreck also invites reflection on the human dimension of trade and survival. Who oversaw the loading of these goods, their safe passage, and their intended distribution? Were the crew merchants, laborers, or a mix of specialists? What dangers did they face? Not just from the sea, but from piracy, political upheaval, or natural disaster. The loss of the Uluburun ship reminds us that even the most essential and carefully organized systems were vulnerable to sudden catastrophe, leaving tangible traces that speak of both human ingenuity and the ever-present uncertainty of the ancient world. Even more intriguing is the presence of items whose origins remain debated. Some ingots bear marks suggesting ownership or destination, yet their exact meaning is unclear. Decorative objects hint at ceremonial or symbolic roles, suggesting that trade was not purely economic, but also cultural. Could the ship have been transporting gifts or tribute between powerful rulers, in addition to raw materials and luxury goods? Were some items intended to signal status, allegiance, or negotiation across kingdoms? The answers remain elusive, hidden beneath layers of bronze, gold, and centuries of sediment. Standing today on the shores near Uluburun, it is easy to imagine the ship's final journey, a crew steering carefully along a jagged coast, aware of the wind, the waves, and the treasures aboard. And yet, despite the care, the sea claimed it, preserving a remarkable snapshot of a world long vanished. Its discovery has allowed us a rare glimpse into the complexity, ambition, and interconnectedness of Bronze Age civilizations, yet it also leaves us with a profound sense of mystery. The Uluburun Shipwreck, in its silent repose beneath the waves, continues to speak to us of an age defined by trade, technology, and human endeavor, but also by uncertainty. How many other ships, laden with the wealth and knowledge of their age, were lost to the sea? What secrets of routes, trade networks, and daily life remain hidden beneath the waters of the Mediterranean? And how might the movement of metals, luxury goods, and ideas have influenced the rise and fall of the civilizations we have explored, from the Minoans to the Indus Valley, from Troy to Palestine? The shipwreck leaves us with more questions than answers, a reminder that the mysteries of the Bronze Age are far from exhausted, waiting patiently to be discovered once more. High on the rugged hills of Sardinia, clusters of stone towers rise abruptly from the earth, their conical shapes silhouetted against the shifting sky. These enigmatic structures, known as Nuragics, are the enduring legacy of the Nuragic civilization, a people who flourished from around 1800 to 500 BC. Built entirely of massive, unmortared stones, some standing over 20 meters tall, these towers dominate the landscape, a testament to both architectural skill and societal organization. Yet despite their impressive scale, the purpose of these monuments, and the people who built them, remains shrouded in mystery. The Nuragic civilization, though primarily associated with these towers, left behind a rich archaeological record. Bronze figurines depicting warriors, animals, and ritual scenes, fortified villages, and extensive networks of tombs and sacred wells. Bronze, mined and traded across the Mediterranean, played a central role in their culture, hinting at connections with distant lands, from the Aegean to the coasts of the Iberian Peninsula. Sardinia's position at the crossroads of maritime routes made it both a hub and a frontier, yet much of the island's Bronze Age history remains unrecorded, leaving gaps that modern archaeology continues to probe. Mainstream interpretations suggest that Nuragics served a variety of functions: fortresses, watchtowers, communal centers, or even religious temples. Their placement across strategic hilltops and near fertile plains indicates careful planning, with some towers forming interconnected networks, allowing signals or messages to be passed across distances. Yet the absence of written records leaves the specifics of their use tantalizingly unclear. Were these monuments primarily defensive, or did they serve as centers of ritual and power, uniting communities under shared beliefs? Or could they have been both, their meaning shifting with the needs of successive generations? Speculative theories deepen the intrigue. Some scholars propose that Nuragic may have had astronomical alignments, marking solstices or celestial events, much like the Nebra Sky Disk we explored earlier. Could the towers have been part of a wider system of observation, encoding knowledge of the heavens into stone? Others suggest that the Nuragic people engaged in complex trade networks, exchanging metals, pottery, and crafted goods across the Mediterranean. Evidence of copper and tin ingots, similar to those found in the Uluburun Shipwreck, hints at an economy intertwined with distant civilizations. Yet how exactly these networks functioned, and the degree of influence Nuragic Sardinia held over regional politics and trade, remains largely speculative. The bronze artifacts themselves speak volumes, yet raise further questions. Small statuettes depict scenes of warriors, ships, and ritual activity, hinting at social hierarchies, martial traditions, and spiritual beliefs. Sacred wells and underground chambers suggest ritual practices tied to water and fertility, yet their precise purpose is uncertain. Were these objects and structures the tools of daily life, or symbols of power and religious authority? And how did the Nuragic people balance the practical demands of survival with the construction of monuments that still inspire awe millennia later? Even the geography of Sardinia adds to the mystery. The island's rugged interior, interspersed with plains and coastal harbors, allowed for both isolation and connection. Nuragics are often clustered near water sources, fertile land, or strategic vantage points, yet others stand in seemingly remote locations. Could these towers have served as territorial markers, asserting control over resources or trade routes? Or were they deliberately placed in remote areas to serve spiritual or ceremonial purposes, distant from everyday settlement? The landscape itself seems to hold clues, yet its full story remains obscured beneath layers of soil, vegetation, and time. The disappearance of the Nuragic civilization adds another layer to this puzzle. By the first millennium BC, their monumental towers were largely abandoned, villages depopulated, and bronze working reduced. Influences from Phoenicians, Carthaginians, and later Romans altered the cultural landscape, yet much of the Nuragic legacy endured, embedded in the stones and artifacts scattered across the island. Why did a civilization capable of such architectural, metallurgical, and social sophistication gradually fade from prominence? Was it conquest, economic decline, environmental change, or a combination of forces beyond the reach of historical record? Walking among the Nuras today, one senses both ingenuity and enigma. The towers stand in quiet testimony to a people who mastered stone, metal, and organization, yet whose daily lives, beliefs, and ultimate fate remain largely hidden. The interplay of monument, artifact, and landscape creates a dialogue across millennia, a dialogue that invites reflection on human creativity, ambition, and impermanence. And so the Nuragic civilization continues to challenge our understanding. How did these island communities organize labor, governance, and trade? What knowledge of metallurgy, astronomy, or ritual has been lost to time? As we trace the contours of the towers and study the bronzes and sacred wells, we are left with a profound sense of mystery, a reminder that the Bronze Age was not only a time of technological innovation, but also of secrets, vanished knowledge, and questions that remain unanswered, waiting for future generations to uncover. Along the sun-scorched plains and estuaries of southwestern Iberia, where the Guadalquivir River spills into the Atlantic, whispers of an ancient civilization still linger. Tartessos, a kingdom spoken of in Greek and Phoenician texts, emerges from these river valleys like a shadow of a dream. Described as wealthy, powerful, and rich in metals, particularly silver and tin, its cities remain lost to the sands of time. Archaeologists and historians alike have searched for physical evidence, yet Tartessos, if it ever truly existed as a centralized kingdom, has proven remarkably elusive. Its story is written more in myth and fragmentary accounts than in the ruins of palaces or temples. Classical writers portrayed Tartessos as a land of extraordinary wealth, a place where merchants and kings amassed treasures that dazzled the Mediterranean world. Its existence is intertwined with Bronze Age trade networks, tin from distant mines, silver from Iberian mountains, and luxury goods traveling along rivers to distant harbors. Could Tartessos have served as a hub connecting the metallurgical riches of Iberia with the broader Bronze Age world? If so, its role in shaping early commerce, technology, and cultural exchange may have been far more significant than surviving artifacts suggest. Mainstream archaeological interpretations suggest that Tartessos may correspond to settlements along the Guadalquivir and Guadiana rivers, yet conclusive evidence remains elusive. Excavations have uncovered traces of early urban centers, fortified sites, and metalworking workshops, but nothing definitively labeled Tartessos. Some scholars propose that the kingdom was more a loose confederation of city-states than a single centralized polity. Yet even these modest settlements imply a society with sophisticated organization, access to resources, and knowledge of trade and metallurgy. How did these communities govern themselves, and what cultural or spiritual systems held them together? These questions remain tantalizingly unanswered. Speculative theories add layers to the mystery. Could Tartessos have been the origin of myths that later inspired stories of Atlantis, a wealthy, advanced civilization lost to sudden catastrophe? Some researchers suggest that environmental changes, such as shifts in river courses or flooding of estuaries, may have erased its cities from the landscape, leaving only faint traces for modern archaeologists to uncover. Others hypothesize that Tartessos was gradually absorbed by emerging Iberian cultures or displaced by invading peoples, leaving wealth scattered and its memory preserved only in legend. Yet why do classical sources speak with such certainty about its riches, its kings, and its role in trade if the physical evidence is so elusive? The material evidence that does exist hints at sophistication and extensive connections. Tartessian inscriptions, still only partially understood, suggest a form of writing distinct from contemporaneous scripts in the Mediterranean. Bronze and tin artifacts, tools, and ornaments indicate a mastery of metallurgy, while recovered coins and jewelry hint at both wealth and the social importance of material display. Could Tartessos have been a center where technological knowledge, particularly in bronze production, was refined and transmitted across the Western Mediterranean? And if so, why did such knowledge fade, leaving behind tantalizing fragments rather than a continuous historical record? Geography itself both concealed and protected the kingdom. Rivers, marshes, and estuaries provided natural barriers, while fertile plains allowed for agricultural production sufficient to support dense settlements. Yet these same waterways may have contributed to Tartessos's disappearance. Rising sea levels, river silting, or catastrophic flooding could have rendered urban centers uninhabitable, forcing populations to disperse and erasing the very traces of their existence. How many advanced settlements may have been swallowed by the land itself, leaving only legends for us to reconstruct? Even the narrative of Tartessos's wealth and influence raises questions about the broader Bronze Age world. How far-reaching were its trade networks? Did merchants from the Aegean, the Levant, or even the islands of the Western Mediterranean regularly traverse its rivers to acquire metals and exotic goods? Could Tartessos have functioned as a conduit of knowledge, technology, and culture, connecting the mineral-rich Iberian Peninsula to the wider Mediterranean world, much as Uluburun and Sardinia did? And if so, what forces, environmental, social, or political, ultimately caused its disappearance from both map and memory? Walking along the muddy banks of the Guadalquivir today, it is possible to imagine the bustle of Tartessian harbors. Boats laden with tin, silver, and other treasures, merchants negotiating deals, and artisans at work forging metals into tools and ornaments. And yet, for all its apparent wealth and influence, the kingdom remains a phantom, glimpsed only through fragments, legends, and speculation. Its cities, palaces, and marketplaces lie beneath layers of sediment, waiting for discovery, or perhaps lost forever. Tartessos endures as one of the most enigmatic civilizations of the Bronze Age. Its wealth, technological sophistication, and connections to distant lands suggest a society of remarkable capability. Yet the lack of definitive archaeological evidence leaves us with more questions than answers. What did daily life look like in this kingdom of metal and myth? How did its people organize, govern, and trade? And what ultimately led to its disappearance, leaving only a tantalizing echo in the annals of history? As we ponder these mysteries, Tartessos reminds us that the Bronze Age was a world of complexity, connection, and secrets, many still buried, waiting to be uncovered. Perched on a gentle rise above the Hisarlik Plain in northwestern Anatolia, the ruins of ancient Troy stretch across layers of time, their foundations etched with centuries of human endeavor. Excavations reveal a city that was rebuilt and expanded again and again, each layer telling a story of prosperity, conflict, and resilience. Yet despite its prominence in Bronze Age trade and mythology, the ultimate fate of the Trojans remains a mystery. By the first millennium BC, the city that once thrived along the coast, controlling trade between the Aegean and Anatolia, seems to have vanished from history, leaving behind only scattered ruins, pottery shards, and fragments of inscriptions. Troy, or Wilusa, as it may have been known in contemporary records, flourished from as early as 3000 BC, reaching its peak in the late Bronze Age. The city's strategic location on the Dardanelles gave it control over trade routes linking the Mediterranean to the Black Sea, and its massive fortifications testify to a society accustomed to both commerce and conflict. Archaeological layers reveal successive periods of destruction and reconstruction, suggesting the city endured repeated sieges and natural disasters. And yet, despite its resilience, by the end of the Bronze Age, the Trojans themselves seem to have disappeared from the historical stage. Mainstream explanations point to a combination of environmental and human factors. Earthquakes, floods, and soil degradation may have weakened the city's infrastructure, while warfare, whether from Mycenaean invaders, local rivals, or raiding parties, could have further destabilized society. Some scholars propose that the Trojans migrated gradually, abandoning their homes for more secure regions, while others suggest a sudden catastrophic collapse. Yet the precise combination of events that led to their disappearance remains uncertain. Why did a city capable of rebuilding itself multiple times eventually fade from memory? The archaeological record adds to the mystery. Excavations have uncovered monumental walls, palaces, and storerooms, as well as evidence of long-distance trade in metals, pottery, and luxury goods. The presence of Mycenaean pottery, for instance, indicates cultural exchange, or perhaps conflict, with the Greek mainland. Bronze weapons, tools, and ingots hint at a society deeply engaged in metallurgy, linking Troy to the wider Bronze Age world, from the Aegean to Anatolia and beyond. Could disruptions in trade, perhaps stemming from wider regional collapses, have played a role in the city's decline, cutting off the flow of essential resources and wealth? Speculative theories raise further questions. Some propose that the Trojans' disappearance was linked to shifting geopolitical powers in the late Bronze Age, when empires rose and fell across the eastern Mediterranean. Could the collapse of neighboring kingdoms, or the arrival of new invaders, have undermined Troy's position as a trade and political hub? Others suggest environmental catastrophe, rising sea levels, shifting river courses, or prolonged drought may have rendered the city less habitable, forcing populations to disperse. In this view, Troy's decline was not sudden, but a gradual erosion of vitality, leaving only the stones and debris for future generations to uncover. The cultural imprint of the Trojans complicates the picture further. Homeric epics, though written centuries later, preserve the memory of a city renowned for wealth, skill, and conflict. Archaeological evidence provides glimpses into the material culture that inspired these stories: fortified walls, elaborate tombs, and warrior graves, but cannot fully account for the social and political networks that once sustained the city. How closely do these epics reflect historical reality, and how much is myth layered over fact? Did surviving Trojans integrate into other emerging societies, their knowledge, craft, and traditions carried into distant lands even as their city faded? Geography itself played a role in Troy's vulnerability and resilience. Nestled between the Aegean coast and inland plains, the city controlled key routes but also faced exposure to natural and human threats. Earthquakes in the region are well documented, and the proximity of rivers meant both fertile soil and the risk of flooding. How did these environmental pressures shape daily life, governance, and defense? Could Troy's ultimate disappearance have been as much a result of geography as of warfare or political upheaval? Walking among the ruins today, one senses both permanence and impermanence. The foundations of towers and walls hint at human ingenuity, yet their emptiness evokes the fragility of civilizations. The Trojans were skilled metallurgists, traders, and city builders, yet their disappearance underscores the vulnerability of even the most prosperous societies. Their story is a reminder that cities are not immutable. They rise and fall, leaving traces that may puzzle scholars for millennia. And so, the disappearance of the Trojans remains an enduring enigma. Was it war, famine, environmental change, or a combination of factors that led to the city's final abandonment? What became of its people, their knowledge, their culture, and their connections to the broader Bronze Age world, from Crete to the Levant, from Sardinia to Tartessos? As we examine the ruins, study the artifacts, and consider the written accounts, we are left with questions that refuse simple answers, a reminder that even in a world of monumental achievements, some mysteries remain hidden, waiting patiently for discovery. On the windswept plains of Salisbury in southern England, the colossal stones of Stonehenge rise with a quiet, enigmatic presence. Encircled by rings of smaller bluestones and sarsens, these megaliths, some weighing over 20 tons, stand as silent witnesses to thousands of years of human history. During the Bronze Age, roughly 2,500 to 1,500 BC, Stonehenge was at the height of its use, serving purposes that remain debated, even as it offers tantalizing glimpses into the minds and lives of the people who shaped it. The arrangement of the stones is precise, their placement aligning with the movements of the sun and possibly the moon. On the summer solstice, sunlight streams through the heelstone, illuminating the center of the monument, while the winter solstice casts long shadows across the inner circle. This architectural sophistication suggests knowledge of astronomy and careful observation over generations. But what did these alignments mean to Bronze Age societies? Were they tools of agricultural planning, guiding the timing of planting and harvest, or did they serve spiritual or ceremonial purposes, connecting people to cycles far greater than themselves? Archaeological evidence provides hints but rarely answers definitively. Human remains, some cremated and others buried, have been found near the site, suggesting ritual activity or even a sacred cemetery. Tools, pottery fragments, and animal bones point to gatherings and feasts, perhaps marking seasonal or religious events. Yet the scale and effort required to transport and erect the stones, some from over 200 kilometers away in the case of the blue stones, raises further questions. How did Bronze Age people organize such labor-intensive projects without written records or advanced machinery? And why dedicate such immense resources to a monument whose function still eludes us? Mainstream interpretations often frame Stonehenge as a ceremonial center, a place of ritual, commemoration, or astronomical observation. Yet other theories suggest more complex functions. Could the site have been a unifying hub for dispersed communities? A place where trade, politics, and religious authority converged? Or perhaps it was a teaching space, where astronomical knowledge, social hierarchies, and cultural stories were transmitted across generations. Evidence of long-distance connections, the movement of stones, artifacts, and even ideas, points to a society deeply intertwined with broader Bronze Age networks, from the coasts of Cornwall to Ireland and beyond. Speculative theories extend even further, hinting at symbolism, cosmic knowledge, and spiritual practice. Some suggest that the monument encoded celestial patterns, functioning as a kind of calendar or map of the heavens. Others propose that its construction was a display of power, wealth, and communal identity, a project that demonstrated the capability and cohesion of the society that built it. Yet all of these ideas remain interpretive, layered upon fragments of physical evidence, leaving the ultimate purpose of Stonehenge open to imagination as well as study. The surrounding landscape adds additional layers of intrigue. Other monuments and henges dot the Salisbury Plain, forming a network of sacred and ceremonial sites. Ditches, burial mounds, and avenues suggest that Stonehenge was not isolated but part of a much larger ritual landscape, perhaps extending across miles. How did these spaces interact, and what role did Stonehenge play within this broader constellation of sites? Was it a destination, a gathering place, or a marker along ancient routes connecting communities across southern Britain? The monumental effort and extraordinary planning required to construct Stonehenge emphasize not only technical skill, but also social cohesion. Organizing labor, transporting massive stones, and orchestrating repeated construction phases over centuries required coordination, leadership, and shared purpose. Yet, the society that accomplished this left no written records of its intentions. How did Bronze Age communities transmit this knowledge across generations? And why, despite the enormous effort invested, did the monument fall out of use and enter the realm of legend and mystery? Visiting the site today, one feels both awe and quiet contemplation. The stones themselves are enduring, yet their meaning remains ephemeral, slipping between practical function and symbolic resonance. Bronze Age people, navigating a world of agriculture, trade, and emerging metallurgy, invested immense resources into this singular monument. The careful alignment with celestial cycles, the scale of labor, and the presence of ritual artifacts all speak to a society deeply concerned with time, death, and perhaps the cosmos itself. And yet, for all its grandeur, Stonehenge retains its mysteries. What rituals took place within its circle? What knowledge and beliefs were encoded in the positioning of stones and ditches? How did this monument influence the lives of Bronze Age communities across Britain? And what connections might it have held to the broader Mediterranean and Atlantic worlds we have explored, from Troy to Tartessos, Sardinia, and beyond? As we stand in the shadow of these ancient megaliths, we are reminded that some questions endure, that human ambition and curiosity often leave traces that are at once monumental and inscrutable, waiting patiently for new discoveries and insight. Perched upon the rolling hills of Crete, overlooking fertile valleys and the sparkling waters of the Aegean, the ruins of Knossos evoke the grandeur of a civilization that flourished over 3,000 years ago. The great palace of Knossos, the ceremonial and political heart of the Minoan world, is a sprawling complex of courtyards, storerooms, ceremonial halls, and intricate corridors. Its multi-level architecture, frescoed walls, and advanced plumbing systems suggest a society of remarkable sophistication. Yet beneath the grandeur lies a host of mysteries, and even centuries of excavation have only begun to unravel the palace's secrets. The palace thrived during the Bronze Age, reaching its peak around 1700 to 1400 BC. Archaeologists have uncovered expansive storage magazines filled with pithoi, giant clay jars, that held olive oil, wine, and grains, evidence of an organized economy capable of sustaining a densely populated urban center. Frescoes depicting bulls, ceremonial processions, and marine life hint at a society deeply intertwined with ritual, myth, and the surrounding natural world. The architecture itself is staggering. Light wells and open courtyards illuminate interior spaces, while sophisticated drainage systems carry water efficiently through the palace. How did the Minoans conceive and execute such an ambitious design without the benefit of modern engineering? Mainstream interpretations describe Knossos as a political and religious hub, a center where rulers, priests, and artisans converged to govern, trade, and conduct ceremonies. Yet the scale and complexity of the palace raise further questions. Was it a royal residence, a city of administration, or both? How were the multiple levels, labyrinthine corridors, and vast storerooms utilized? Some scholars suggest that the palace itself was a symbol of power, a tangible manifestation of authority and social cohesion. But what kind of society required such a structure? And what pressures or ambitions drove its repeated reconstruction over centuries? Speculative theories deepen the intrigue. The intricate layout of Knossos, with its confusing corridors and staircases, has inspired comparisons to the labyrinth of myth, a place associated with the Minotaur and the legendary King Minos. Could myth have originated from the palace's actual design, its complexity capturing the imagination of later storytellers? Others point to the frescoes and artifacts as evidence of advanced knowledge in astronomy, ritual, and perhaps even early mathematics. Was Knossos merely a palace, or did it function as a center of knowledge and cultural transmission, linking Crete to the wider Mediterranean world in ways we are only beginning to understand? Trade and wealth were central to the palace's influence. Minoan Crete was a maritime civilization, its fleets navigating the Aegean and beyond. Artifacts from Knossos reveal connections with the Cyclades, Anatolia, Egypt, and even as far as the Levant, including Palestine. Pottery, metalwork, and luxury goods found within the palace illustrate a network of exchange that spanned vast distances, underscoring the strategic importance of Knossos in Bronze Age commerce. How did these trade networks shape the palace's wealth? And to what extent did access to distant resources contribute to its political power? Yet even with its sophistication, Knossos was vulnerable. Evidence of destruction layers, likely caused by earthquakes, fires, or external attacks, speaks to periods of upheaval. Despite being rebuilt repeatedly, the palace eventually fell into decline, leaving only the ruins we see today. What combination of natural disasters, economic pressures, or socio-political instability led to its final abandonment? And how did the loss of this cultural and administrative hub affect the broader trajectory of Minoan civilization across the Aegean? The human element of Knossos adds another layer of fascination. Frescoes depict ceremonial dancers, bull-leaping rituals, and daily life, offering glimpses into the society's culture, values, and spirituality. Yet we are left to imagine the lives of ordinary citizens, laborers, and traders who sustained the palace's operations. How did these people perceive their rulers, their gods, and their place within a complex, hierarchical society? And what knowledge, skills, or traditions were lost when the palace fell silent, leaving only stone, pottery, and frescoes to tell its story? Standing among the remains today, one feels a profound sense of both achievement and mystery. The Great Palace of Knossos is a monument to human ingenuity, artistic expression, and social organization. Yet it also embodies the impermanence of civilizations. Its corridors whisper of power, ritual, and connection across the Mediterranean, but the precise nature of its influence remains elusive. The palace reminds us that even the most sophisticated societies can leave behind only partial records, fragments of human ambition frozen in stone. And so the mysteries of Knossos endure. How did the palace's builders achieve such architectural and artistic mastery? What were the true functions of its ceremonial spaces, storerooms, and labyrinthine corridors? How did Knossos influence and interact with neighboring civilizations, from Troy to Sardinia, Tartessos, and beyond? As we trace the contours of its walls, frescoes, and artifacts, we are left with questions that resist easy answers, a testament to the enduring allure and enigma of the Bronze Age, inviting us to explore further and wonder what still lies hidden beneath the ruins. On the flat plains of the Indus River, the sun rises over the sprawling remnants of Mohenjo-Daro, one of the most remarkable urban centers of the Bronze Age. Founded around 2600 BC, this city stretches across a meticulously planned grid of streets and avenues, revealing an astonishing level of organization that continues to inspire awe. From above, the city appears as a precise network of rectilinear blocks, with broad main streets intersecting at perfect angles, flanked by carefully constructed brick houses, public baths, and granaries. Even after millennia, the logic and sophistication of its layout are evident, suggesting a civilization with advanced knowledge of urban design, engineering, and governance. Mohenjo-Daro's city planners employed standardized fired bricks, uniform in size and shape, allowing for a consistency rarely seen in contemporary settlements. Central to the city was the Great Bath, a large, watertight structure that may have been used for ritual purification, communal gatherings, or civic ceremonies. The drainage system is equally impressive, with covered brick sewers, street drains, and private baths connected to a sophisticated network, indicating an unprecedented concern for hygiene and public health. How did the architects conceive of such complex systems in a time without written blueprints or modern surveying tools? And what motivated a society to invest so heavily in urban planning, sanitation, and monumental public works? Mainstream interpretations suggest that Mohenjo-Daro was a hub of trade, administration, and social organization, a city capable of supporting tens of thousands of residents. Evidence of standardized weights and measures, along with extensive craft production and metallurgy, points to a centralized authority capable of regulating commerce and resources. Yet no clear palaces or temples have been uncovered, leaving scholars to wonder how political and religious power were structured. Could leadership have been collective, distributed among councils, or organized through forms of governance now lost to history? Speculative theories add further intrigue. Some researchers propose that the city's careful orientation, aligned along cardinal points and possibly following celestial patterns, may have had symbolic or ritual significance, linking urban design with the cosmos. Others wonder whether the uniformity of construction and urban layout reflects a social system designed to enforce equality, efficiency, or even control, balancing the needs of administration, trade, and daily life. Were these planning principles unique to Mohenjo-Daro, or part of a broader Indus Valley approach that connected multiple cities into a cohesive cultural and economic network? Trade networks provide another dimension to the mystery. Artifacts such as semi-precious stones, beads, and copper implements reveal links with distant regions, including Mesopotamia, the Persian Gulf, and beyond. Mohenjo-Daro was not isolated. It was a node in an extensive Bronze Age network where knowledge, resources, and culture flowed across continents. Yet the details of these exchanges and the mechanisms by which such a city maintained prosperity over centuries remain partially obscured. Did external pressures, environmental challenges, or internal socio-political dynamics eventually undermine this urban marvel? Environmental factors may hold part of the answer. The Indus River, which provided fertile soil and trade routes, could also be capricious, shifting channels or flooding with devastating force. Archaeological evidence suggests that changes in river courses, combined with potential droughts or soil salinization, may have stressed agricultural systems and disrupted urban life. Yet, even as the physical infrastructure endured, the social and economic structures that sustained Mohenjo-Daro ultimately faltered. What combination of natural and human forces led a city of such planning, hygiene, and sophistication to decline and eventually disappear from memory? The human element is equally compelling. Houses, workshops, and streets reveal the daily life of artisans, traders, and families. Yet the absence of monumental tombs or royal iconography raises questions about social hierarchy. How did ordinary citizens experience life in a city built with such precision? What beliefs, rituals, and traditions guided their actions? And how did these intersect with the technological and administrative innovations around them? The material record offers tantalizing hints, but no definitive answers. Walking through the ruins today, one can almost hear the echoes of Bronze Age life. The footsteps of residents along the straight streets, the splash of water in the great bath, the clatter of tools in workshops. Mohenjo-Daro remains a testament to human ingenuity, a city that combined utility, beauty, and foresight in ways that continue to challenge modern understanding. Its disappearance, like that of Knossos, Stonehenge's builders, or the Trojans, reminds us that even the most advanced societies are vulnerable to forces beyond their control. And so, the mysteries of Mohenjo-Daro endure. How did the Indus Valley planners achieve such architectural, engineering, and social mastery? What forces ultimately led to the decline of this extraordinary city, leaving behind only bricks, streets, and fragments of daily life? As we contemplate these questions, Mohenjo-Daro serves as a silent witness to the complexity and fragility of Bronze Age civilization, inviting us to explore further and wonder what knowledge, culture, and secrets may still lie hidden beneath the sands. Perched upon rugged hills overlooking the Argolic Gulf, the ancient citadels of Mycenae and Tiryns dominate the landscape with an imposing presence. Massive stone walls, constructed from enormous limestone boulders, rise with a sense of permanence that seems almost defiant against the passage of millennia. These are the Cyclopean walls, so named by later Greek storytellers who believed that only the mythical Cyclopes could have moved such colossal stones. Even today, the sheer scale and precision of these constructions provoke awe, hinting at a civilization of extraordinary ambition, skill, and organizational capacity. Mycenae, famously associated with the legendary King Agamemnon, flourished between 1600 and 1100 BC, while Tiryns, slightly older, shows similar architectural mastery. The walls, some over 6 meters thick, enclose palatial complexes, storerooms, and residential quarters, forming fortifications that have survived earthquakes, invasions, and centuries of erosion. The stones, irregular yet fitted with remarkable care, suggest a knowledge of structural engineering and a capacity for large-scale labor organization rarely matched in the Bronze Age. How did these civilizations quarry, transport, and assemble such massive blocks without modern machinery? And what social structures enabled such monumental feats? Mainstream archaeological interpretations emphasize defense as a primary function. The thickness, height, and angular construction of the walls would have made them virtually impregnable to contemporary weaponry, allowing Mycenaeans and Tirynthians to safeguard their palaces, wealth, and populations. Yet the scale of construction often exceeds what would be strictly necessary for defensive purposes. Could the walls have also served a symbolic role, projecting power, prestige, and authority over the surrounding plains? Or were they designed to awe, to impress both subjects and rivals with the civilization's mastery of stone, organization, and labor. Speculative theories add further layers to the mystery. Some scholars suggest that the wall's immense weight and irregularity may have been a deliberate design to withstand seismic activity, a form of early earthquake engineering. Others propose a ritual or cosmological function, with walls and gates aligned according to cardinal directions or celestial observations, linking architecture with belief systems and cultural identity. Could these structures have been not only fortresses but also ceremonial landscapes, blending martial, political, and spiritual purposes into a single monumental expression? Evidence from within the citadels reinforces the sense of sophistication. Megaron halls, central to palatial complexes, reveal spaces for governance, religious ceremonies, and communal gatherings. Burials and shaft graves outside the walls contain gold masks, jewelry, and weaponry, testifying to both wealth and ritual significance. Artifacts suggest extensive trade connections, with imports of tin, copper, ivory, and luxury goods from across the Mediterranean, including Anatolia, Crete, and even distant lands along the Levantine coast, including Palestine. The walls in this context may have protected more than just people. They safeguarded economic, political, and cultural networks that linked Mycenae and Tiryns to the wider Bronze Age world. Yet, despite this sophistication, the Cyclopean walls also conceal enigmas. The precise methods of construction remain debated. Did laborers employ ramps, levers, and coordinated teams? Or was their knowledge lost to time that enabled such feats? And while the palaces within the walls appear carefully organized, the absence of extensive written records limits our understanding of governance, societal hierarchy, and daily life. How did these societies maintain order, motivate labor, and transmit knowledge across generations in the absence of widespread literacy or formal documentation? The vulnerability of these civilizations adds another layer of intrigue. By the end of the Bronze Age, around 1100 BC, Mycenaean palaces were largely abandoned, and Tiryns' walls fell into disuse. Archaeological evidence indicates destruction layers, fire, and signs of conflict, yet the precise causes of decline remain uncertain. Were they victims of external invasions, internal strife, or broader regional disruptions, such as the movements of the Sea Peoples or environmental pressures affecting trade and agriculture? How could a civilization capable of building seemingly indestructible walls ultimately fail to preserve its own continuity? Standing today amidst the towering stones, the Cyclopean walls of Mycenae and Tiryns evoke a mixture of admiration and mystery. They are testament not only to architectural ingenuity, but also to the ambitions, fears, and aspirations of Bronze Age people. Each stone, massive yet carefully placed, suggests both practical necessity and symbolic intention. They were meant to endure, and in that sense, they have, but the societies that raised them have vanished, leaving only questions, artifacts, and the enduring majesty of stone. And so, the Cyclopean walls continue to guard their secrets. How did the Mycenaeans and Tirynthians accomplish such feats of engineering? What social, religious, and economic structures enabled the construction of walls capable of withstanding both human and natural forces? How did these fortresses connect to the broader networks of the Bronze Age, from Crete to Sardinia, Tartessos, Troy, and Mohenjo-Daro? As we trace the contours of these colossal stones and imagine the lives of those who raised them, we are reminded that even the most imposing monuments preserve as much mystery as they reveal, inviting us to wonder what else may be hidden in the shadows of Bronze Age history. Carved into the rugged cliffs near the ancient city of Hattusa in central Anatolia, the rock sanctuary of Yazılıkaya rises like a silent testament to a civilization that flourished over 3,000 years ago. Here, two open-air chambers etched directly into the limestone hold a procession of deeply mysterious reliefs, depicting gods, goddesses, and ritual scenes in a style both precise and enigmatic. Bathed in the changing light of the sun, the sanctuary's figures seem almost alive, casting shadows across the stone that shift with the day and the seasons. In the Bronze Age, roughly between 1400 and 1200 BC, Yazılıkaya served as a sacred space for the Hittite Empire, yet its true purpose, and the meaning behind its carvings, remains an enduring puzzle. The main chamber, known as Chamber A, features a central pathway flanked by reliefs of deities in profile, their faces serene yet inscrutable, adorned with elaborate headgear and ceremonial garments. The sequence suggests a procession or ritual march, moving in a deliberate order, perhaps reflecting divine hierarchy or cosmological principles. Some scholars interpret the carvings as representations of the Hittite pantheon, including storm gods, sun goddesses, and protective spirits, each carefully arranged to convey mythological narratives. Yet even with centuries of study, the exact stories, rituals, and symbolism remain elusive. Were these carvings intended for public display, or were they reserved for the eyes of priests and royalty during sacred ceremonies? Beyond its artistic sophistication, Yazılıkaya demonstrates a remarkable understanding of spatial organization and natural phenomena. The sanctuary is aligned along cardinal axes, and some researchers suggest that its orientation and the position of the reliefs may correspond to celestial events, such as solstices or lunar cycles. Could the sanctuary have functioned as a kind of astronomical observatory, linking religious practice with the movements of the heavens? And if so, how much knowledge of astronomy did the Hittites possess, encoded subtly in stone, awaiting discovery by future generations? Mainstream interpretations emphasize Yazılıkaya as a ceremonial and religious center, where the Hittite kings performed rituals to ensure divine favor, agricultural abundance, and political stability. The reliefs may have been an integral part of state ideology, visually reinforcing the connection between the king, the gods, and the people. Yet the scale and effort involved in carving these massive figures directly into the cliff face suggest a significance that goes beyond mere symbolism. What prompted the Hittites to invest such labor and skill into a sanctuary so remote and exposed, far from the main palaces and administrative centers? Speculative theories broaden the mystery. Some suggest that Yazılıkaya served as a portal between the human and divine worlds, a sacred space where earthly rulers could commune directly with the gods. Others posit that the sanctuary encoded astronomical, calendrical, or even calendrical ritual knowledge, aligning sacred events with the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars. Could the carvings themselves function as a guide or record, preserving knowledge for initiates, priests, or future generations? And how much of this knowledge has been lost, leaving only stone reliefs as silent witnesses to practices that were once vibrant and alive? The surrounding landscape adds to the sanctuary's intrigue. Perched above the plains of Anatolia, Yazılıkaya overlooks a region that was strategically vital to Bronze Age empires, including trade routes connecting Anatolia, the Aegean, and the Levant, including Palestine. Its remote location provided isolation for ritual observances, yet the Hittites' extensive network of cities and roads ensured that the sanctuary remained central to religious and political life. How did the sanctuary relate to Hattusa and other ceremonial sites? Was it part of a broader ritual circuit, a place for seasonal gatherings, or a permanent locus of divine authority? Archaeological studies also hint at environmental and symbolic considerations. The open-air chambers utilize natural rock formations as part of their design, with the cliffs themselves forming walls, ceilings, and sacred thresholds. The interaction of sunlight and shadow across the reliefs may have been deliberately calculated, creating visual effects that enhanced ritual experience. How intentional were these alignments, and how might they have influenced the perception of those participating in ceremonies? Could the sanctuary have been designed to evoke awe, reverence, or even a sense of cosmic order, reinforcing the authority of the Hittite state and its rulers? Walking among the carved figures today, one feels both intimacy and grandeur. The gods seem to observe silently, their presence etched in stone, timeless and immutable. Yet the society that commissioned these carvings has long since vanished, leaving only whispers of ritual, power, and devotion. Yazılıkaya stands as a reminder of human ambition and the enduring desire to connect with forces larger than ourselves, a physical manifestation of belief, artistry, and societal organization that challenges modern understanding. And so, the mysteries of Yazılıkaya remain. What precisely did these reliefs communicate to those who carved them, and to those who once worshipped beneath the Anatolian sun? How did the sanctuary integrate religious, political, and possibly astronomical knowledge into its design? What secrets of Hittite cosmology, statecraft, and ritual practice remain hidden in stone, awaiting discovery? As we trace the contours of these ancient carvings and contemplate the lives of those who labored to create them, we are left with questions that endure, a silent testament to the depth and complexity of Bronze Age civilizations across the Mediterranean and Anatolia. On the sun-drenched islands of Malta, jagged limestone cliffs give way to fields dotted with monumental stone structures, some of the oldest freestanding buildings in the world. These are the megalithic temples, remnants of a culture that flourished during the Bronze Age, between roughly 3,600 and 2,500 BC. Unlike typical defensive structures or dwellings, these temples, Gantija, Hagarchim, Menajdra, among others, rise with a deliberate geometry, curving walls and massive stones that weigh tens of tons, arranged in formations whose purpose continues to confound modern researchers. Walking among them, one feels the resonance of rituals, the echo of ceremonies, and a sense of human ingenuity that seems almost otherworldly. The temples are constructed from enormous limestone blocks, some brought from quarries several kilometers away, shaped and fitted with remarkable precision. Doorways align with the rising sun at solstices, and interior chambers suggest spaces designed for ceremonial or religious functions rather than for everyday living. Frescoes, carved reliefs, and carefully positioned altars indicate a society deeply invested in symbolic and spiritual life. Yet, unlike other Bronze Age civilizations, Malta leaves no evidence of defensive walls, palaces, or urban centers of comparable scale, raising questions about the societal structures that supported such monumental construction. How did a relatively small island population organize, transport, and erect such enormous stones, and what social or spiritual imperatives drove this effort? Mainstream interpretations emphasize ritual, fertility, and ancestor worship. Many archaeologists propose that the temples functioned as ceremonial centers, where communities gathered to perform rites connected to life, death, and seasonal cycles. Artifacts such as statuettes, figurines, and altars suggest veneration of a mother goddess or fertility cult, reflecting deep preoccupations with birth, growth, and sustenance. Yet the sheer scale and precision of construction hint at something more profound. Were these temples purely sacred spaces, or did they serve additional purposes, perhaps as astronomical observatories, communal gathering points, or symbolic expressions of social cohesion? Speculative theories amplify the sense of wonder. Some researchers have noted alignments within the temples that correspond to solstices, equinoxes, or lunar cycles, suggesting advanced astronomical knowledge for a seemingly small and isolated community. Could the temples encode a calendar, guiding agricultural practices or ritual observances? Others have proposed that the megaliths may have been intended to harness acoustic or energetic effects, creating spaces where sound, light, and shadow enhanced ritual experience. How much of this intentionality is preserved in stone, and how much is lost to the passage of millennia? Trade and resource management offer another layer of mystery. The islands of Malta were relatively resource poor, lacking large forests and extensive metal deposits, yet the inhabitants were able to quarry, transport, and shape massive stones while sustaining a population capable of complex social organization. Evidence of imported obsidian, shells, and other materials hints at maritime connections with Sicily, Sardinia, and potentially even distant Mediterranean cultures, including contacts along the Levantine coast, including Palestine. How did these small island communities maintain long-distance networks, and what knowledge or techniques were exchanged along these routes?
Archaeological study also reveals traces of human activity surrounding the temples: stone foundations, altars, hearths, and burial sites. These suggest that the temples were part of a broader cultural landscape, integrating spiritual practice with daily life. Yet, without written records, the beliefs, social hierarchies, and rituals of the Maltese builders remain largely speculative. Were priests or shamans central figures in guiding construction and ceremonies, or did communal leadership organize these efforts collectively? And what knowledge, wisdom, or traditions were preserved or lost when these societies eventually disappeared? Environmental factors may also have played a role in the temple's eventual decline. Rising seas, soil depletion, or changing climate patterns could have disrupted agriculture and settlement, forcing communities to abandon once thriving ceremonial centers. Yet the megaliths remain, enduring against the elements, a silent witness to human ambition, devotion, and ingenuity. The very permanence of the stones contrasts with the fragility of the societies that raised them, reminding us that even the most monumental achievements are vulnerable to time, nature, and human change. Walking among the megaliths today, one is struck by their scale, precision, and the intangible sense of purpose they convey. Each curved wall, massive lintel, and carefully aligned chamber embodies knowledge, labor, and imagination. Yet the people who built them have left no explanatory texts, no records of their rituals, and no clear account of their beliefs. The temples speak silently, their message preserved in stone but open to interpretation, evoking awe, curiosity, and wonder. And so, the mysteries of Malta endure. How did these island communities conceive, organize, and execute monumental architecture without apparent hierarchies or written records? What knowledge, astronomical, spiritual, or social, was encoded in stone, and how much of it remains hidden? As we trace the curves of walls, the alignment of chambers, and the carved altars of these extraordinary temples, we are left with questions that reach across time, linking Malta to the broader tapestry of Bronze Age civilization, from Knossos and Mycenae to Troy, Mohenjo-Daro, and Tartessos. The megaliths stand as silent witnesses, challenging us to imagine the knowledge, devotion, and mysteries that shaped the lives of those who once walked among them.
Stretching across the windswept plains of Brittany in northwestern France, the Carnac stones form one of the most enigmatic landscapes of the European Bronze Age. Thousands of upright stones, known as menhirs, rise from the earth in precise alignments, forming long avenues, circles, and rows that extend for kilometers, disappearing into the misty horizon. Even after more than 5 millennia, the arrangement of these megaliths exudes a silent, haunting presence, evoking questions about the people who raised them and the purposes these massive stones once served. The stones themselves vary in height and width, some reaching nearly 6 meters, hewn from local granite yet arranged with meticulous care. From aerial views, the patterns are both orderly and mysterious, suggesting careful planning and intentionality. Archaeologists note that the longest rows, such as those at Menek, Kermario, and Kerleskan, extend in precise directions, implying a knowledge of geometry and spatial organization that seems extraordinary for a society without written records. How did these communities determine the placement, alignment, and spacing of the stones, and for what purpose were these imposing monuments constructed? Mainstream interpretations often emphasize ritual and religious functions. The stones may have been markers for sacred spaces, locations for ceremonies, or even territorial boundaries. Some researchers suggest that the alignments correspond to astronomical phenomena, such as solstices, equinoxes, or lunar cycles, indicating that the Carnac builders observed and recorded the movement of the heavens with remarkable precision. Could these megaliths have served as a calendar, guiding agricultural cycles, or as sacred markers, aligning human activity with cosmic forces? Yet the sheer scale of Carnac raises questions that go beyond ordinary explanations. Transporting, raising, and arranging thousands of granite stones would have required an extraordinary level of organization, coordination, and labor. For a society without apparent urban centers, fortifications, or written records, the collective effort involved is staggering. What motivated these ancient communities to commit such resources, time, and energy to a task whose meaning remains largely obscure? Was it devotion, social cohesion, competition, or a combination of forces that drove the creation of such a monumental landscape? Speculative theories add further layers of intrigue. Some researchers propose that the stones may have functioned as a form of communication or memory, encoding knowledge about celestial cycles, seasonal changes, or migratory patterns. Others suggest that they may have been intended to manipulate perception, creating spaces where movement, light, and shadow evoked particular experiences during rituals. Could the builders have intended the stones to be not merely physical markers, but instruments of spiritual or psychological influence, guiding thought, behavior, and belief? Trade and cultural connections provide additional context. While Brittany is relatively isolated geographically, the presence of polished stone tools, ornaments, and materials suggests that its inhabitants maintained contact with broader European networks, exchanging ideas, technology, and possibly ritual practices. Similarities can be observed with other Bronze Age megalithic sites, from Malta and Sardinia to the British Isles, and even along the coasts of the Levant, including Palestine. Could knowledge, architectural principles, or spiritual traditions have traveled across these vast distances, influencing distant communities and linking seemingly disparate cultures into a shared ritual and technological framework? Archaeological study also hints at environmental and symbolic considerations. The stones are often placed on elevated ground, following natural contours, and appear to relate to rivers, coastlines, or ancient pathways. The interaction between landscape and monument may have amplified their significance, integrating human construction into the natural world in ways that conveyed meaning, direction, or sanctity. How much of this intentionality has survived, and how much has been lost to erosion, agricultural activity, and the passage of millennia? Standing amidst the endless avenues of stones, one cannot help but feel a sense of human ambition, reverence, and mystery. Each menhir, worn by wind and time, is a fragment of a larger narrative that stretches across thousands of years, a story of observation, devotion, and communal effort. Yet the voices of the builders remain silent. We can trace their hands in the placement of stone, we can feel their presence in the alignment of rows, and we can glimpse their connection to the land and sky, but the precise intentions, rituals, and meanings remain just beyond reach. And so, the Carnac stones endure as both monument and mystery. How did the people of Bronze Age Brittany conceive, coordinate, and execute such a vast landscape of stone? What knowledge, astronomical, ritual, or social, was encoded in their arrangement? And what insights might yet be uncovered? hidden in plain sight among the moss-covered rocks and rolling fields. As we walk along the ancient avenues, tracing the rhythm of the stones, we are reminded that the mysteries of the Bronze Age are not confined to palaces, baths, or temples alone. They extend across the lands themselves, in silent, enduring stone, waiting for the careful observer to notice, wonder, and reflect. On the sun-baked plains of northern Syria, near the Mediterranean coast, lie the ruins of Ugarit, one of the most remarkable cities of the Bronze Age Levant. For centuries, its walls, temples, and palaces slumbered beneath layers of sand and rubble, silently preserving the memory of a civilization that thrived between 1450 and 1200 BC. Today, the remnants of Ugarit rise in quiet testimony to a city that was a hub of culture, commerce, and innovation, linking inland kingdoms to distant Mediterranean and Near Eastern worlds, including connections along the coast to Palestine. Standing amid its ruins, one can almost hear the echoes of merchants, scribes, and priests, each contributing to a society that, for its time, was astonishingly advanced. Ugarit's cityscape reveals careful planning and sophistication. Massive stone walls enclosed districts that contained residential quarters, monumental temples, and administrative buildings. Streets ran in organized patterns, hinting at urban design principles that anticipated later civilizations. The royal palace, with its sprawling courtyards and ceremonial halls, demonstrates both political authority and architectural knowledge. Archaeologists have uncovered storerooms filled with clay tablets, each inscribed with a script that would revolutionize the written word, the earliest known alphabet. These tablets, etched with cuneiform signs adapted for Ugaritic use, reveal not only administrative records and trade agreements, but also hymns, myths, and poetry, offering glimpses into a culture that valued both bureaucracy and imagination. Mainstream scholarship emphasizes Ugarit's role as a vibrant trade and cultural center. Its port connected Anatolia, the Aegean, Cyprus, Egypt, and Palestine, facilitating the exchange of metals, textiles, and luxury goods. Artifacts from distant lands testify to networks that spanned the Mediterranean and the Near East, creating a city that thrived on connection and mobility. Ugarit's prosperity, however, raises questions about its sudden decline. By the end of the 13th century BC, the city was destroyed, leaving only ruins and charred walls behind. Was its fall the result of invasions by the Sea Peoples, internal upheaval, economic collapse, or a combination of environmental and social pressures? The precise cause remains a matter of debate, shrouding Ugarit in mystery. Speculative interpretations deepen the intrigue. Some suggest that Ugarit's sudden disappearance may reflect not merely political upheaval, but also shifts in climate, trade routes, or social structures, factors that disrupted the delicate balance sustaining its wealth and influence. Could Ugarit have been a warning of the fragility of even the most advanced Bronze Age societies? Moreover, the city's intellectual and artistic achievements invite further questions. Did the invention of the alphabet arise from necessity, curiosity, or cultural cross-pollination with neighboring civilizations, including Crete, Mycenae, and Troy? How did scribes organize, preserve, and transmit knowledge that would later influence entire regions, despite the fragility of clay and the absence of libraries as we understand them? The temples and shrines of Ugarit offer additional mysteries. Excavations reveal elaborate religious spaces dedicated to deities such as Baal, El, and Anat, adorned with reliefs, figurines, and ritual objects. The alignment of certain structures suggests an awareness of celestial patterns, echoing practices observed in Malta, Brittany, and Anatolia. Could these spaces have functioned as both spiritual centers and astronomical observatories, guiding religious ceremonies, agricultural planning, or political events? And what ceremonies, long lost to time, brought the city together beneath the gaze of the gods? Evidence from the surrounding region hints at Ugarit's broader significance. Its archives reference diplomatic relations, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges with neighboring powers, connecting the city to Egypt, Anatolia, Cyprus, and the islands of the Aegean. Even in its final years, Ugarit played a pivotal role in networks that linked Europe, the Mediterranean, and the Levant, including Palestine. Yet the suddenness of its disappearance leaves a striking void. How could such a well-connected, organized, and culturally sophisticated city vanish so abruptly, leaving only ruins, artifacts, and fragments of its written legacy? Walking among the remnants of Ugarit today, one senses both the ambition and vulnerability of Bronze Age civilization. The city's walls, though weathered, still enclose spaces once teeming with life, palaces where rulers deliberated, streets where merchants traded, temples where prayers echoed. The clay tablets, some inscribed with what may have been love poetry, religious hymns, or trade records, attest to a people deeply invested in recording, understanding, and shaping their world. Yet the answers to so many questions remain elusive. And so, Ugarit continues to guard its secrets. What forces, political, environmental, or otherwise, caused its sudden fall? What knowledge, stories, and cultural practices were lost in the flames and ruins? How did this city, at the crossroads of continents, influence distant civilizations, and what remains hidden in the clay tablets yet to be fully deciphered? As we wander its streets, examining the echoes of a vanished society, we are reminded that even the most advanced Bronze Age cities can vanish, leaving behind only whispers of their greatness and mysteries that endure through the millennia. On the banks of the Euphrates River, in what is now modern Syria, the ruins of Mari stretch across the arid landscape, remnants of a once thriving Bronze Age metropolis. Among its sprawling streets, temples, and fortifications, the lost palace of Zimri-Lim emerges as a monument to ambition, power, and human ingenuity. Excavated in the 20th century, the palace sprawls over several acres, with hundreds of rooms, courtyards, and ceremonial halls, providing a window into the life of a king who ruled around 1775 to 1761 BC. Even today, walking through its partially restored walls, one can sense the grandeur, authority, and mystery embedded within this ancient seat of power. The palace was more than a royal residence. It was a center of administration, diplomacy, and ritual. Its corridors once echoed with the footsteps of scribes, officials, and emissaries, while vast halls witnessed negotiations and treaties that reached across the Near East. Thousands of clay tablets, inscribed with cuneiform, have been recovered, detailing everything from trade agreements to court intrigues and legal disputes. Through these texts, we glimpse a city intimately connected to distant lands, including Anatolia, Crete, and the Levantine coast, including Palestine. Yet, for all its sophistication, Mari, and its palace, remains enigmatic. How did such a structure function as both a home, a fortress, and a hub of governance, and what daily rituals filled its vast spaces? Architecturally, the palace is a marvel of planning and complexity. Rooms are arranged around multiple courtyards, allowing light, ventilation, and movement to flow naturally through the structure. Decorative elements, from painted walls to carved reliefs, hint at ceremonial and symbolic purposes, while storage rooms, workshops, and administrative offices reveal the logistical organization required to sustain a city of tens of thousands. How did Zimri-Lim's architects achieve such scale and sophistication without modern tools or machinery? And to what extent did ritual, symbolism, and practical necessity guide their design? Mainstream interpretations emphasize the palace's dual role as political and religious center. Certain rooms appear dedicated to cultic activity, with altars, shrines, and ritual artifacts suggesting ongoing ceremonies meant to invoke divine favor. The king himself was a central figure, both temporal and sacred, bridging the human and divine realms. Yet some aspects remain puzzling. How were these rituals performed within such a sprawling complex? Did the architecture itself encode cosmic or religious knowledge, guiding participants' movements, perceptions, and experiences in ways now lost to time? Speculative perspectives deepen the intrigue. Some scholars have noted that the palace's layout and orientation may align with astronomical phenomena, seasonal cycles, or even river currents, implying an awareness of natural and celestial rhythms. Others propose that the immense size and intricacy of the palace served as a deliberate demonstration of power and control, intended to awe visitors, dignitaries, and subjects alike. Could Zimri-Lim's architects have designed these spaces as instruments of psychological as well as administrative authority, blending politics, ritual, and environment into a unified experience? The palace also offers glimpses into Marie's broader geopolitical role. As a hub on the Euphrates, it facilitated trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange across the Bronze Age world. Materials from distant regions, including metals, ceramics, and luxury goods, were stored and distributed within its walls, indicating connections that extended from Anatolia to Egypt and the Levant, including Palestine. How did a single palace coordinate such complex networks, and what knowledge, logistical, commercial, or diplomatic, was required to maintain these systems in an era without modern communication? Despite centuries of scholarship, the palace's ultimate fate remains partly shrouded in mystery. Mari was destroyed around 1760 BC, likely by Hammurabi of Babylon, and much of the palace was buried under debris, leaving only fragments of walls, reliefs, and tablets. These remnants, however, are sufficient to evoke both awe and questions. What conversations, rituals, and negotiations took place in halls that no longer exist? What political or religious knowledge was encoded in the structure, lost with the city's destruction? How did the collapse of such a sophisticated complex resonate across the Bronze Age world, influencing neighboring civilizations? Walking through the excavated remains today, one cannot help but feel the presence of past lives, ambition, and intellect. Courtyards, doorways, and ceremonial chambers speak to a civilization capable of extraordinary planning, organization, and artistry. Yet the silence of the stones also invites reflection, reminding us that even the most monumental achievements are vulnerable to time, conflict, and nature. The palace stands as both a testament to human ingenuity and a riddle that resists full comprehension. And so, the lost palace of Zimri-Lim endures in memory and stone, a beacon of the complexity and sophistication of Bronze Age civilization. How did the king and his people navigate politics, ritual, and trade within such an elaborate environment? What knowledge, strategies, and stories have been lost, buried beneath centuries of dust and ruin? As we trace the corridors, imagine the ceremonies, and examine the inscriptions, we are reminded that Mari, like Ugarit, Knossos, Mycenae, and the great Mediterranean and Near Eastern civilizations, continues to hold mysteries that invite curiosity, wonder, and reflection, a silent echo of lives long past, still reaching across the millennia. Rising from the fertile plains of northwestern Syria, the ancient ruins of Ebla stretch across the landscape, their mud brick foundations and remnants of monumental walls hinting at a city that once stood at the heart of Bronze Age civilization. Flourishing around 2500 to 2250 BC, Ebla was more than a city. It was a kingdom, a center of administration, trade, and culture whose influence extended across the Levant and into regions as distant as Anatolia and Palestine. Even in ruin, the scale and organization of Ebla evoke a sense of ambition and sophistication that continues to captivate archaeologists and historians alike. Excavations reveal a city meticulously structured, with palaces, temples, and administrative buildings arranged in distinct sectors, suggesting a careful understanding of urban planning and governance. The royal palace, with its grand halls and courtyards, served not only as a residence for the kings of Ebla, but also as the heart of administration, where scribes recorded transactions, treaties, and ceremonial events on thousands of clay tablets. These inscriptions, written in a previously unknown Semitic language, offer glimpses into diplomacy, economics, and religion, and hint at Ebla's pivotal role as a mediator between distant civilizations. How did a kingdom of this scale maintain its authority, manage trade networks, and preserve cultural identity amid the shifting dynamics of the Bronze Age? Ebla was a thriving trade hub, strategically positioned between the Mediterranean and the inland routes of the Levant. Goods such as timber, metals, ivory, and luxury items flowed through its markets, linking it to neighboring regions including Palestine, Anatolia, and the Aegean. Archaeological evidence of imported materials, combined with references in Eblate tablets, suggest that the kingdom actively participated in long-distance exchange, fostering connections that carried ideas, technologies, and spiritual practices across the Bronze Age world. What knowledge, innovations, or cultural elements did the inhabitants of Ebla contribute to these networks, and how might their influence have rippled across distant lands? Religion and ritual were central to Eblate life. Temples dedicated to deities such as Dagon, Kura, and Hadad reveal a rich pantheon, while ritual objects and ceremonial spaces indicate complex religious practices. The interplay between spiritual and political authority appears pronounced. The king functioned both as a ruler and as an intermediary between the divine and the human, consolidating his power through ritual as much as through governance. Yet much of this religious life remains a mystery. How were ceremonies conducted within palaces and temples? Did architectural arrangements encode symbolic or cosmological knowledge now lost to time? The discovery of the Ebla tablets in the 1970s added a new layer of intrigue. Among them were administrative records, letters, and even literary compositions, offering unparalleled insight into the daily, political, and spiritual life of the kingdom. The complexity of these records indicates a highly literate society with sophisticated bureaucratic structures, capable of managing large-scale trade, taxation, and diplomacy. But for all the insight they provide, questions remain. Were there layers of knowledge, ritual, or strategy intentionally concealed or encoded in ways that modern archaeology cannot yet decipher? How did the kingdom balance innovation with tradition, commerce with ceremony, and internal cohesion with external pressures? Speculative theories deepen the mystery. Some researchers propose that Ebla may have functioned as a repository of knowledge, preserving astronomical, mathematical, or legal insights that influenced neighboring civilizations. Others suggest that the sudden decline of the kingdom, around 2250 BC, may reflect environmental pressures, shifts in trade, or incursions by rival powers, leaving a sudden void in a region previously marked by continuity and stability. Could natural disasters, political upheaval, or a combination of factors have brought about the kingdom's disappearance so abruptly, erasing institutions, knowledge, and culture almost entirely? Walking among the ruins today, one senses both achievement and fragility. Massive foundations, remnants of palaces, and fragments of walls speak to human ambition and ingenuity, while the silence between the stones evokes the impermanence of even the most sophisticated societies. The scale of planning, administration, and cultural expression at Ebla challenges modern assumptions about Bronze Age civilization and invites reflection on the complexity of early urban life. How did a city of mud brick and timber coordinate such networks, and what strategies, political, economic, or spiritual, sustained it over generations? Ebla remains a symbol of the broader mysteries of the Bronze Age. Its urban sophistication, commercial reach, and literary achievements place it among the great civilizations of its time. Yet the details of its daily life, internal politics, and spiritual practices remain tantalizingly elusive. What wisdom, knowledge, and stories lie buried beneath the ruins, waiting to be uncovered? And as we explore Ebla alongside Mari, Ugarit, and other contemporary centers, we are reminded that the Bronze Age was a world of remarkable complexity, where human ambition, ingenuity, and mystery intertwined in ways that continue to captivate our imagination. Across the ancient landscapes of the Near East and the Mediterranean, the faint glimmer of bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, marks one of the most transformative technological achievements of the Bronze Age. In scattered workshops, mines, and smelting sites, artisans of 3300 BC first discovered that combining these metals produced a substance harder and more durable than copper alone. The origins of this discovery are difficult to pinpoint, obscured by millennia of lost knowledge and subtle experimentation, yet its consequences shaped the course of civilization. Bronze allowed the creation of sharper weapons, more resilient tools, and intricate ornaments that spread across continents, altering societies, economies, and even belief systems. The earliest evidence of bronze use emerges in Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and the Levant, including sites like Ebla, Mari, and Ugarit. Archaeologists have uncovered crucibles, slag, and ingots, hinting at an understanding not merely of metallurgy, but of chemical properties, temperatures, and alloy ratios. How did these early metallurgists determine that a small proportion of tin added to copper created an entirely new material? Was it the result of systematic experimentation or a serendipitous accident observed and refined over generations? And once discovered, how quickly did this knowledge diffuse across the vast networks of Bronze Age cities, from Palestine and Syria to Sardinia, Crete, and beyond? Bronze production was not a trivial endeavor. Copper ore and tin deposits were rarely found together, requiring long-distance trade and sophisticated logistics. Evidence from the Uluburun Shipwreck, centuries later, shows that tin and copper were transported across the Mediterranean, linking distant regions into a web of economic and cultural exchange. Was the initial spread of metallurgy driven by necessity, ambition, or curiosity? Did merchants, kings, and artisans understand the strategic advantage inherent in controlling metal production? Or was it a craft gradually elevated to power and prestige? The technical knowledge embedded in early metallurgy suggests a deep, albeit now partially lost, understanding of materials. Artisans learned to smelt, cast, and alloy metals using furnaces capable of reaching extraordinary temperatures. They shaped tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects with precision, producing uniform ingots and finely crafted ornaments that could endure the wear of daily life or symbolize authority and religious devotion. Yet many questions remain. How did metallurgists acquire and transmit this knowledge before widespread writing systems? Were there secret workshops or guilds preserving techniques from one generation to the next? Beyond practical application, bronze held symbolic and cultural significance. Objects of bronze, swords, daggers, axes, and ceremonial vessels, often carried inscriptions, motifs, and inlays, suggesting a spiritual dimension to metallurgy. Could the transformation of raw ore into a durable, gleaming metal have inspired metaphors of power, immortality, or divine favor? Did the rarity and complexity of bronze confer social status, reinforcing hierarchies within kingdoms like Ebla, Mari, and Ugarit, or among the seafaring traders navigating the coasts of Sardinia, Crete, and the Levant, including Palestine? Speculative perspectives explore even deeper enigmas. Some scholars argue that early metallurgists may have been guided by empirical observations of natural alloys or meteorites, exploiting phenomena that seem almost magical to the untrained eye. Could celestial iron-rich meteorites or unique mineral formations have influenced experimentation with smelting and alloying? Did early societies perceive bronze as a gift from the earth or the heavens, imbued with inherent power beyond its physical properties? The emergence of bronze also set the stage for a broader transformation of societies. The production and control of metals encouraged specialization, the rise of skilled artisans, and the growth of trade networks connecting diverse regions. Cities like Ebla, Mari, and Ugarit became centers not only of politics and culture but of technology, linking the Levant, Anatolia, and the Mediterranean into a network of knowledge and influence. Yet the precise pathways of innovation remain unclear. Which regions developed techniques independently, and which borrowed, adapted, or exchanged knowledge across continents? The inherent mystery of bronze is compounded by the scarcity of surviving artifacts. Organic tools, wooden molds, and ephemeral workshops have long since vanished, leaving only traces in slag, ingots, and finished objects. Even where physical evidence exists, the intentions and knowledge of the craftsmen remain elusive. How did they communicate complex procedures without modern notation? Were experiments guided by intuition, observation, or instruction from elders? And as societies grew dependent on bronze, did they face hidden challenges, resource depletion, conflict over access to ores, or environmental consequences from smelting that remain underappreciated today? Walking among ancient ruins or examining surviving artifacts, one senses a civilization at the threshold of understanding, where fire, stone, and metal combined to produce a tool that would reshape human history. Bronze, in its dual role as technology and symbol, catalyzed the rise of kingdoms, trade networks, and social hierarchies. Yet much about its origin, transmission, and cultural meaning remains shrouded in mystery. What first sparked the realization that copper and tin could be transformed into something stronger? And as we trace the threads of bronze across Ebla, Mari, Ugarit, Sardinia, and the wider Mediterranean, we are reminded that the story of metallurgy is also a story of human ingenuity, curiosity, and the enduring allure of the unknown. Even today, as archaeologists uncover crucibles, ingots, and tools, the questions linger. How did bronze first emerge? And what secrets did its discovery reveal to those who held it in their hands? The answers may be lost to time, but the gleam of bronze continues to echo across millennia, a reminder of the mysteries and marvels of the Bronze Age. On the windswept plains near the Orontes River, where the deserts of Syria meet the fertile lands of the Levant, the stage was set for one of the most enigmatic military confrontations of the Bronze Age, the Battle of Kadesh. Fought around 1274 BC between the forces of Ramesses II of Egypt and the Hittite king Muwatalli II, Kadesh stands as a moment where politics, strategy, and human ambition collided in a theater of mud, chariots, and dust-laden plains. Today, the landscape is quiet, dotted with remnants of fortifications and scattered stones. Yet in its silence echoes the thunder of thousands of chariots, the clatter of bronze weapons, and the tense calculations of two great empires. Historical records of Kadesh come primarily from Egyptian inscriptions and reliefs, notably in the temples of Luxor and Abydos, which portray Ramesses II heroically confronting overwhelming odds. The Egyptian accounts describe brilliant tactical maneuvers, personal bravery, and divine intervention. Yet Hittite records tell a different story, emphasizing their own strategic strength and asserting control over the contested region. The disparities in these accounts invite deeper inquiry. What truly transpired on those plains? And how do we separate historical fact from political narrative, exaggeration, or propaganda? The battle itself was unprecedented in scale. Thousands of chariots, supported by infantry and archers, clashed across the open terrain, their movements guided by intricate coordination and timing. bronze weaponry, from spears and swords to arrowheads, played a decisive role, highlighting how advances in metallurgy reshaped warfare. Did the mastery of bronze give one side a material advantage, or was strategy, terrain, and leadership the determining factor? How did armies of the Bronze Age communicate, maneuver, and adapt in the chaos of combat without modern signaling or reconnaissance? Kadesh also illustrates the importance of geography and logistics. The city itself, situated near vital trade routes and water sources, became the focal point of empire-building ambitions. Whoever controlled Kadesh could influence trade, access resources, and project power across the Levant, including the corridor leading to Palestine. Why did two of the era's greatest powers commit so fully to this contested zone? Was the battle merely about land and resources? Or did it also carry symbolic and political weight, representing the apex of royal authority and divine favor? Speculative interpretations raise further questions. Some historians suggest that Kadesh may not have been a simple pitched battle, but a series of skirmishes, maneuverings, and psychological warfare, where perception and deception were as crucial as force. Egyptian reliefs depict Ramesses confronting overwhelming enemy forces alone, a dramatization that may encode ritualized notions of kingship and divine protection, rather than literal events. Could the battle's true story have been intentionally obscured, recorded in monuments to inspire awe and reinforce legitimacy rather than convey military reality? The aftermath of Kadesh deepens its mystery. Despite massive loss of life and dramatic clashes, neither Egypt nor the Hittites secured absolute dominance. Instead, the conflict eventually led to the earliest known international peace treaty, inscribed in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Akkadian cuneiform. This unprecedented diplomatic resolution hints at a sophisticated understanding of balance, negotiation, and statecraft. What compelled two warring powers to formalize peace after such a costly confrontation? Was it pragmatism, divine counsel, or a recognition of the limits imposed by geography, logistics, and human endurance? The battle also illuminates broader Bronze Age dynamics. Armies relied on intricate networks of supply, communication, and organization, connecting political centers like Thebes, Hattusa, Mari, and Ebla with the front lines. The movement of chariots, horses, and bronze weapons required resource control, metallurgy expertise, and administrative oversight. How did empires maintain these vast systems? And what vulnerabilities did they face from environmental pressures, rebellion, or rival powers? And what lessons from Kadesh resonated across the Mediterranean, influencing military strategy, diplomacy, and metallurgy for generations to come? Walking the plains today, the quiet is almost disorienting. Scattered stones, eroded fortifications, and the occasional fragment of bronze hint at a human drama of immense scale, yet much remains unknown. How did individuals experience the battle? Soldiers, charioteers, or commanders? And what strategies, fears, and improvisations shaped the outcome in ways not preserved in official records? The tension between monumentally recorded history and the physical, often silent archaeological record invites reflection on how knowledge is preserved, distorted, or lost over millennia. Kadesh remains a testament to both human ambition and historical ambiguity. The clash of empires, the deployment of bronze weaponry, and the emergence of formal diplomacy together illuminate the sophistication of Bronze Age societies. Yet the true story, the precise movements of troops, the strategies employed, and the individual experiences, remains tantalizingly beyond our reach. What secrets lie beneath the plains, buried under centuries of sand, sediment, and silence? And as we trace the threads of metallurgy, trade, and empire from Ebla and Mari to Kadesh and beyond, we are reminded that the Bronze Age is a world of intertwined mystery, ingenuity, and human drama, where the echoes of clashing chariots still invite curiosity and wonder. Across the rolling plains of the ancient Near East, the rhythmic thundering of hooves once echoed through the Bronze Age world, announcing a revolution in warfare and mobility: the chariot. Sleek, two-wheeled, and often drawn by pairs of horses, chariots were more than vehicles. They were instruments of power, status, and military innovation. From the battlefields near Kadesh to the ceremonial avenues of Mari, Ebla, and Ugarit, these elegant constructions carried warriors, kings, and sometimes even entire armies into the heart of history. Today, their traces are faint: a handful of wheel fragments, bronze fittings, and depictions on clay tablets. But the impact of these vehicles resonates across millennia. The earliest chariots emerged around 2000 BC, yet their precise origins remain shrouded in mystery. Archaeologists have uncovered remnants in Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and the Levant, but debates persist. Did chariots arise independently in multiple regions? Or were they the product of diffusion along trade and communication networks? And what inspired the combination of wood, leather, and bronze into a vehicle capable of both speed and tactical advantage? The very conception of the chariot suggests a deep understanding of engineering, animal husbandry, and materials, knowledge that seems remarkably sophisticated for societies often portrayed as prehistoric. Constructing a chariot demanded mastery over bronze and timber. Bronze fittings, axles, wheel rims, and decorative elements enhanced durability while balancing weight, allowing speed across uneven terrain. The precision required in assembly was astonishing, as even a small miscalculation could render a chariot unstable or useless in battle. How did artisans of Ebla, Mari, and the Hittite heartlands achieve such technical sophistication without the tools or mathematical formalism available today? Was there a form of apprenticeship or secret guilds transmitting this knowledge across generations, or did each city-state innovate independently? Chariots transformed warfare. Armies that once relied on foot soldiers and simple projectile weapons could now strike with speed, precision, and psychological impact. The Battle of Kadesh demonstrates their significance vividly. Thousands of chariots clashed across the plains, coordinating maneuvers that required not only physical skill, but acute strategic planning. Bronze-tipped spears and composite bows allowed charioteers to strike while moving at remarkable speeds, creating a dynamic, chaotic battlefield. Yet questions remain. How were these units trained to operate cohesively, and how did commanders communicate across the tumult of battle? Could chariots have also been used for scouting, messaging, or ceremonial purposes beyond their obvious military application? The mystery deepens when we consider the social and symbolic dimensions of chariots. They were expensive, requiring elite materials and skilled labor, and thus became markers of status and authority. Kings, nobles, and high-ranking warriors paraded in chariots during ceremonial occasions, while inscriptions and reliefs depict them as instruments of divine favor or supernatural protection. Did the chariot serve as a literal embodiment of power, allowing rulers to traverse their dominions, assert control, and display divine sanction? Or was it also a tool of intimidation, projecting dominance across landscapes and populations far from the front lines? Chariots also reveal the intricacies of Bronze Age trade and logistics. Horses, rare and demanding care, had to be bred, transported, and maintained. Timber and bronze had to be sourced and worked with precision. Networks stretching from the forests of Anatolia to the plains of Palestine and the Mediterranean islands facilitated the acquisition of these materials. Were these trade routes intentionally developed to supply armies, or did the demand for chariots shape broader economic patterns? And how did societies balance the costs of production, maintenance, and training with the strategic benefits these vehicles provided? Speculative theories raise further enigmas. Some scholars suggest that chariots may have had ritual significance, used in ceremonies to convey the power of kings or to reenact mythological events. Could certain chariots have been designed not purely for war, but as sacred vehicles in processions or religious observances? And what of the designs themselves? The shapes, decorations, and axle configurations? Do they encode knowledge lost to time, combining empirical engineering with symbolic meaning in ways we cannot fully interpret today? Walking across the sites where chariots once thundered, the plains of Kadesh, the urban centers of Ebla and Mari, and the ceremonial avenues of Ugarit, one senses both human ingenuity and the fleeting nature of innovation. Physical remnants are scarce, yet the stories they inspire are profound. Chariots connected metallurgy, animal husbandry, strategy, and social hierarchy in a single, extraordinary invention, yet much about their development, use, and cultural significance remains hidden beneath layers of history. The mystery of Bronze Age chariots reminds us of the delicate interplay between technology and society. They reshaped battlefields, influenced diplomacy, and embodied status, yet their origins, methods of manufacture, and full spectrum of uses remain tantalizingly elusive. How did early societies conceive such a transformative device, refine its design, and integrate it into the complex tapestry of Bronze Age life? And as we trace the echoes of these vehicles across Anatolia, Syria, Palestine, and beyond, we are left with an enduring question. What other secrets of innovation, strategy, and culture remain buried, waiting to be discovered in the shadows of history? In the mist-laden wetlands of northern Europe, where reed-filled marshes stretch into quiet horizons and waterlogged peat preserves the past, a haunting discovery awaits those who venture into these remote landscapes: the bog bodies. These remarkably preserved human remains, entombed in the acidic depths of peat bogs for millennia, offer a rare, almost eerie window into Bronze Age life and death. The cold, dark waters have arrested decay in ways that ordinary soil cannot, leaving skin, hair, and even internal organs intact, a testament to the chemical alchemy of the bog itself. As we approach these sites, the silence is profound, broken only by the whisper of wind across the reeds. Yet beneath the surface lies an unsettling intimacy with a world long vanished. Bog bodies date primarily to the later Bronze Age and early Iron Age, though some may reach as far back as 3,300 BC. Archaeologists have unearthed them across Denmark, Germany, Ireland, and the Netherlands, often in solitary positions or arranged carefully as if in ritual. The context of their deposition is enigmatic. Were these individuals victims of violence, sacrifices, or executions? Some display signs of trauma, rope marks around the neck, lacerations, or blunt force injuries, while others seem to have been placed gently in the peat, their eyes closed, limbs folded. What social, spiritual, or political dynamics could have dictated such divergent fates? The bogs themselves are a vital part of the mystery. The acidic, oxygen-poor environment acts as a natural preservative, halting bacterial decay and enabling preservation for thousands of years. Yet why were these particular landscapes chosen for deposition? Did ancient communities recognize the preservative properties of the bog? Or was it a coincidence, an act imbued with symbolic meaning? Some theories suggest that bogs were perceived as liminal spaces, thresholds between the living and the dead, between the mortal world and divine or supernatural realms. Could the very environment have been integral to the ritual or punishment, transforming ordinary death into a liminal, suspended state? The evidence from the bodies themselves offers both clarity and mystery. Hair, often braided or adorned, and clothing fragments, sometimes made from linen or wool, speak to daily life, status, and culture. Yet signs of deliberate violence, strangulation, or stabbing point to something more complex than routine burial. Were these individuals considered transgressors, or did they serve as offerings to gods or spirits? Some scholars suggest ritual sacrifice tied to fertility, seasonal cycles, or political legitimacy, while others propose that the bogs were sites of execution for social or criminal offenses. The truth may lie somewhere between, obscured by the passage of time and the selective survival of evidence. Chemical analysis of peat and human tissue has revealed more puzzles. Diets, isotopic signatures, and even traces of intoxication provide tantalizing glimpses into Bronze Age life. Some individuals had consumed meals shortly before their death, while others show signs of long-term nutritional stress or travel. Were these deaths spontaneous, politically motivated, or orchestrated as part of broader cultural or religious practices? And how did communities negotiate the tension between reverence, fear, and the practicalities of disposing of the dead in a world without permanent cemeteries? The bog bodies also provoke questions about memory and meaning. The act of placing someone in a bog, whether as punishment, sacrifice, or interment, was inherently public, visible, or at least symbolic. These were not casual burials. They were deliberate interventions in landscape and life designed to endure. Yet the precise intentions, beliefs, and emotions that guided these acts remain elusive. How much did these practices serve social cohesion, control, or communication with the divine? And what cultural narratives, now lost, can we reconstruct from these silent witnesses to history? Speculative interpretations invite further intrigue. Some researchers propose that certain bodies were chosen to personify natural or supernatural forces, connecting human life with the cycles of water, fertility, and harvest. Others suggest political or economic symbolism, marking the removal of rivals or the demonstration of power. Could these watery graves have served as messages, warnings, or sacred acts, encoded in ritual gestures we can only glimpse through preservation of flesh and bone? Walking along a northern European bog today, the wind stirring the reeds and the mud glistening under a pale sun, it is difficult not to feel the resonance of those long-ago lives. The bodies themselves are silent, yet their presence evokes questions about identity, mortality, and the interplay between environment and human culture. Each strand of hair, each preserved limb, and each subtle mark of trauma is a story partially told, a fragment of an era otherwise lost to time. The mystery of the bog bodies is a meditation on preservation, ritual, and memory. They embody the intersection of life and death, culture and environment, innovation and belief. And yet, for all the analysis of isotopes, textiles, and trauma, essential questions remain unanswered. Why were these individuals chosen? What exact practices dictated their deposition? And what meanings did Bronze Age communities attach to these watery graves? As we leave the bogs, one cannot help but wonder how many more stories remain hidden beneath the peat, waiting silently to speak across millennia, and what they can teach us about the human experience in an age we can only partially reconstruct. Amid the windswept plains and shallow lakes of Bronze Age Denmark, a remarkable artifact lies quietly, its bronze surface gleaming faintly, even after thousands of years beneath layers of earth. The Sun Chariot of Trundholm. Discovered in a peat bog in 1902, this extraordinary model, a golden disc mounted on a horse-drawn wheeled platform, embodies a vision of celestial movement, linking the heavens, the earth, and human imagination in a way that continues to captivate archaeologists and historians alike. Its presence is both majestic and enigmatic, a tangible echo of a world in which the patterns of the sun were deeply woven into social, spiritual, and technological life. The Sun Chariot dates to approximately 1400 BC, firmly within the European Bronze Age, and yet its purpose remains partially obscured by the passage of time. Crafted from bronze and carefully mounted on wheels of the same material, it depicts a radiant sun disk being drawn by a solitary horse, suggesting a cosmological understanding of solar movement. But why was such a delicate and symbolically charged object created, and what role did it play in the daily or ceremonial lives of the people who made it? Was it a ritual instrument, a teaching tool, or a symbolic artifact designed to mediate between human and divine realms? The technical sophistication of the Sun Chariot is striking. The precision of the bronze casting, the symmetry of the wheels, and the careful attachment of the disc indicate artisans who understood not only metallurgy, but the delicate balance required to transform abstract ideas into tangible, moving objects. How did Bronze Age craftsmen acquire such knowledge, and to what extent was it shared across communities, rather than remaining the guarded expertise of select workshops or religious specialists? The chariot's very form implies a fusion of technology and symbolism, a union of practical skill and spiritual imagination. Scholars have long debated the meaning behind the disc's design. The golden side, radiant and unadorned, is often interpreted as representing the sun at noon, blazing and dominant, while the darker, patterned reverse may signify the sun at night or during its journey beneath the horizon. The horse itself, carefully modeled and mounted, suggests motion, the perpetual cycle of day and night, life and death. Could the Sun Chariot have been used in ritual processions to reenact the sun's daily journey, or was it a symbolic offering, buried intentionally in the bog as a bridge between earthly and celestial powers? The context of its discovery, entombed in peat, adds to its mystique. Unlike ordinary burials or caches of tools, the Sun Chariot was carefully positioned, almost as if placed in quiet reverence, its wheels aligned and disc intact. This deliberate deposition invites speculation. Was it a votive offering to secure divine favor, a ceremonial gift to the forces of nature, or an object retired from ritual use in a final act of consecration? The act of burial itself suggests that its significance extended beyond utility, that it occupied a liminal space between tangible artifact and sacred symbol. Connections to broader Bronze Age culture are evident. Across Europe, objects bearing solar motifs, from gold discs in the British Isles to petroglyphs in Scandinavia, hint at a shared cosmology, a reverence for celestial bodies that influenced calendars, agriculture, and religious practice. The Sun Chariot may have functioned not only as a symbolic object, but also as a tool for understanding time, seasonal cycles, and the rhythms of planting and harvest. Yet, without written records, the precise intentions remain speculative, leaving us to reconstruct meaning through careful observation, comparison, and inference. Speculative theories deepen the intrigue. Some suggest that the Sun Chariot embodies mythic narratives, perhaps representing deities or spirits who guided the sun across the sky. Others argue that it may have functioned as a pedagogical instrument, a three-dimensional map of cosmology designed to teach novices the movement of the heavens. Could it also have served a political role, a statement of power for elites capable of commissioning such a finely crafted object, signaling their connection to divine order and cosmic authority? The Sun Chariot's presence in a bog, much like the bog bodies we explored earlier, emphasizes a fascinating pattern in Bronze Age Northern Europe. The deliberate placement of valuable, symbolically charged objects in liminal, watery landscapes. These deposits reflect a worldview in which water, earth, and celestial forces were intertwined, spaces of both preservation and ritual significance. Were the bogs considered sacred thresholds, where objects and lives could be suspended between worlds, imbued with meaning that transcended their physical form? Standing before the Sun Chariot today, one cannot help but sense the continuity of human wonder and ingenuity. Its wheels, poised to turn, and its golden disk, caught in eternal motion, evoke questions that stretch across time. How did Bronze Age people perceive their place in the cosmos, and how did they transform abstract celestial cycles into material culture? What beliefs, rituals, or myths gave this object its resonance, and what remains lost to history beneath the layers of earth and peat? The Sun Chariot of Trundholm is more than an artifact. It is a window into imagination, technology, and belief, preserved in bronze and peat for over 3 millennia. Its mystery invites reflection on the interplay between the celestial and the terrestrial, between human craft and divine inspiration. And as we consider its wheels, still poised to traverse unseen horizons, we are left with the same quiet wonder that must have greeted its creators. What other secrets of Bronze Age cosmology, ritual, and artistry remain hidden, waiting silently in the bogs and fields of northern Europe? High in the rugged hills of Epirus, Greece, where winds sweep through dense oak and olive groves, lies one of the most enigmatic sacred sites of the ancient world, the Oracle of Dodona. Long before classical temples were erected, before the legendary figures of Greek mythology walked the earth, this sanctuary was already revered, its roots stretching deep into the Bronze Age. The whisper of the oak trees, their leaves rustling in a language older than any written word, seems to carry messages from the past, a language both natural and divine, understood only by those attuned to the subtle interplay between the earth and the heavens. Dodona's significance is both historical and archaeological. By the late Bronze Age, roughly 3,300 BC onward, communities across the Aegean and Balkan regions were developing increasingly complex religious practices, and Dodona appears to have been among the earliest centers for prophecy and ritual consultation. Unlike the better-known Oracle of Delphi, where visions and pronouncements were often spoken by a priestess, Dodona's divination was deeply rooted in the natural environment. Sacred oak trees, their canopies dense and eternal, were believed to be conduits to divine wisdom. But what form did this early oracle take in the Bronze Age, before temples, stone altars, and monumental inscriptions? Archaeological evidence suggests that even in its earliest phases, Dodona was a gathering place, a node where human ingenuity, spiritual practice, and natural observation intersected. Bronze Age votive offerings, including small figurines, weapons, and jewelry, have been unearthed in the surrounding area, hinting at a culture of ritual exchange and reverence. What were these offerings meant to communicate? Were they gifts to deities, attempts to secure protection or favor, or symbols of personal or communal aspirations? And why was this particular location, shrouded in dense forests and overlooking fertile valleys, chosen for such sacred activity? The ritual practices at Dodona were unique in their intimate integration with the environment. Priests, or perhaps early diviners, would interpret the rustling of oak leaves, the flight of birds, and the murmur of water from nearby springs. Such practices suggest a worldview in which the natural world was not merely a backdrop to human action, but an active participant in communication with the divine. Could these forms of environmental divination represent a continuity of Bronze Age cosmology, echoing practices seen in other parts of Europe, where celestial events, river flows, or forest groves informed religious understanding? Historical sources hint at a complexity that stretches beyond simple observation. Herodotus, writing centuries later, described Dodona as a site where priests heard the words of the gods in the rustling of leaves. Yet the full scope of Bronze Age practices remains hidden beneath layers of time. Were there structured rituals, perhaps seasonal or tied to agricultural cycles, that dictated when and how messages were sought from the oak trees? Did early communities come here to resolve disputes, guide political decisions, or interpret omens in matters of trade, war, and diplomacy? Speculative theories expand the intrigue further. Some scholars propose that Dodona functioned as part of a network of proto-oracular centers, connected by shared cosmologies and maritime or overland trade routes. Could messages interpreted in these oak groves have influenced decisions far beyond the immediate region, shaping alliances or conflicts across the Bronze Age Mediterranean? Others suggest that acoustic phenomena, the sound of wind moving through the dense forests or echoing off nearby hills, may have contributed to the perceived voice of the divine, blending environmental physics with human interpretation. The placement of votive objects at Dodona raises additional questions. Small figurines of humans and animals, miniature weapons, and symbolic tools point to intentional communication with unseen forces. Were these offerings acts of supplication, expressions of gratitude, or attempts to harness the power of nature itself? And why were these objects often deposited in seemingly ordinary areas, buried under leaf litter or placed near springs and oak roots, rather than in grand architectural settings? The act of deposition itself, in harmony with the natural landscape, reinforces the idea that Bronze Age religious thought embraced a profound, almost seamless integration of humans, ritual, and environment. The broader cultural context of Dodona is equally compelling. During the Bronze Age, seafaring, trade, and the exchange of ideas spread rapidly across the Aegean and Mediterranean. It is conceivable that the sanctuary drew visitors from distant lands, pilgrims seeking guidance or offering tribute. How might these interactions have shaped local practice, introduced new ritual elements, or contributed to the development of an enduring sacred tradition? Could Dodona have been both a local spiritual center and a node within a wider network of religious, cultural, and economic connections, linking communities across vast distances? Walking among the ancient oak groves of Dodona today, one is struck by the continuity of human curiosity and reverence. The wind carries the same sound it must have carried millennia ago, and the soil still cradles remnants of those who sought understanding, protection, and insight from forces beyond their comprehension. The site is at once tangible and elusive, a place where archaeology illuminates fragments of history, yet where the full dimensions of human belief remain tantalizingly out of reach. The early roots of the Oracle of Dodona remind us that Bronze Age communities were deeply engaged with the world around them, observing, interpreting, and interacting with forces both seen and unseen. They leave us questions rather than answers. How precisely were these early oracular practices conducted? What messages were interpreted from the wind, the leaves, and the water? And how did this sacred landscape influence the lives, politics, and beliefs of those who came to seek wisdom in its shadow? As we contemplate the rustling oaks and the silent votive offerings, it becomes clear that much remains hidden, preserved not in text, but in the enduring mystery of place, ritual, and human imagination. Across the ancient landscapes of the Eastern Mediterranean, traces of human thought and organization are etched into clay tablets inscribed in cuneiform, Linear A, and Linear B. Cities like Ugarit, Mycenae, and Knossos were thriving centers of trade, administration, and culture, their scribes meticulously recording inventories, religious rites, and diplomatic correspondence. These writing systems, sophisticated and precise, offer glimpses into a world both orderly and interconnected, a network of human ambition, commerce, and ritual reaching across the Bronze Age. Yet, by the close of the 12th century BC, many of these systems abruptly vanish. The lines of cuneiform and the elegant strokes of Linear B fade from the archaeological record, leaving behind silent tablets, abandoned archives, and questions that echo across millennia. The collapse of these writing systems is both startling and enigmatic. Linear B, the script of the Mycenaeans, meticulously recorded palace economies detailing rations, livestock, and craft production. Its disappearance coincides with the broader decline of Mycenaean civilization. In Mesopotamia, cuneiform, once the cornerstone of administration and scholarship, fell into disuse in many city-states, while Ugaritic cuneiform ceased to be inscribed on clay tablets at the same time. The speed and simultaneity of these losses suggest more than isolated cultural change. They point toward a systemic disruption, a fracture in the complex networks that supported Bronze Age literacy. What factors contributed to this disappearance? Mainstream explanations often focus on the collapse of urban centers, invasions by external groups, or widespread social upheaval. The upheaval caused by the movements of the Sea Peoples, environmental stress, and economic destabilization likely played a role. But how could a script, an abstract, intellectual achievement, disappear so completely, leaving no direct continuity? And what does this loss reveal about the fragility of knowledge and communication in an age when the written word was so intimately tied to power and administration? Linear B itself illustrates the intimate link between writing and society. Unlike modern scripts, it was largely a tool of the palace bureaucracy used to record goods, resources, and labor. Its disappearance aligns with the destruction of Mycenaean palaces, suggesting that when political and economic structures collapse, the very means of recording and transmitting information can vanish alongside them. Was literacy, then, always an elite skill, dependent on centralized authority and institutional support? And if so, what happened to the scribes themselves, the custodians of knowledge whose hands once inscribed these tablets with such precision? The loss of cuneiform in Ugarit and other Levantine city-states raises equally perplexing questions. These scripts were more than administrative tools. They encoded diplomacy, literature, and ritual. Some scholars propose that widespread conflict and the burning of archives destroyed the material record, while others point to systemic shifts in trade and political alliances that made the scripts obsolete. Yet, even when cities survived physically, the scripts often disappeared, suggesting that the collapse was as much intellectual and cultural as it was material. How do human societies abandon a technology that carries not only practical utility, but also symbolic authority? Speculative theories deepen the mystery. Some researchers propose that changes in religious practice or shifts in ritual authority may have contributed to the abandonment of writing. Could a societal preference for oral traditions, ritualized memory, or symbolic communication have supplanted the need for inscribed records? Alternatively, did the movement of populations during this tumultuous period introduce linguistic and cultural disruptions, making previous writing systems irrelevant or unintelligible to the new communities? Such questions blur the line between material history and the intangible currents of belief, memory, and knowledge. The disappearance of writing also carries broader implications for the transmission of knowledge. Unlike spoken words, inscriptions endure, carrying details across generations. When writing vanishes, an entire dimension of human memory, administrative, historical, literary, vanishes with it. For historians and archaeologists, this collapse leaves gaps that are impossible to fully bridge, forcing reliance on fragmentary records, archaeological context, and comparative studies. How much of Bronze Age experience, ritual, and governance remains forever hidden because the script was lost, its patterns and meanings no longer deciphered or practiced? The material remnants that survive offer tantalizing clues. Clay tablets buried in rubble, half-erased inscriptions, and displaced archives hint at the scale of knowledge once wielded by these civilizations. Each fragment is a testament to a world that was both sophisticated and precarious, a reminder that the survival of culture is intimately tied to the endurance of its institutions, its scribes, and its societal structures. Could there have been efforts to preserve these scripts in oral or symbolic forms, even as the written records fell silent? Or were the methods and knowledge so specialized that they could not survive the collapse of the palaces and cities that sustained them? Standing amidst the ruins of former administrative centers, one senses the quiet gravity of what has been lost. The collapse of Bronze Age writing systems is a story not only of societal transformation, but of human cognition itself, the ways in which ideas, records, and memory are encoded, preserved, or abandoned. These vanished scripts challenge our understanding of continuity, literacy, and the fragile scaffolding of civilization. As we reflect on these empty clay tablets and silent archives, we are confronted with the enduring mystery of absence. What conversations, transactions, and visions were recorded in those lost inscriptions? How did the disappearance of these writing systems shape the trajectories of the peoples who once relied on them? And how much of human history has been irretrievably hidden by their loss? The collapse of Bronze Age writing reminds us that even the most durable human achievements can vanish, leaving behind only questions, shadows, and the silent resonance of civilizations that once spoke through clay and script. High in the arid coastal valleys of Peru, the remains of Caral rise from the desert like echoes of a forgotten civilization. The massive stone terraces, carefully shaped mounds, and step pyramids dominate the landscape, their geometric precision standing in stark contrast to the surrounding sands and scrub. The largest pyramid, rising over 20 meters, commands the view of the entire valley, its terraces and platforms meticulously constructed from sun-baked adobe and local stone. Here, over 4,000 years ago, the people of Caral built not merely structures, but a sophisticated urban environment, a city of plazas, pyramids, and residential compounds that hints at a culture of remarkable organization and vision. Archaeologists have long marveled at Caral's complexity. Radiocarbon dating places its flourishing between 2600 and 2000 BC, making it contemporaneous with some of the earliest civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Yet Caral developed independently, thousands of miles away from the urban centers of the Old World, suggesting that the impulse toward monumental architecture, social stratification, and ritual life arose spontaneously in diverse regions of the globe. The pyramids themselves are enigmatic, not merely tombs nor purely functional structures, but spaces whose purpose seems intertwined with the spiritual and ceremonial life of the city. What compelled these early Andean peoples to construct such monumental forms, and what did they intend to communicate through stone, symmetry, and scale? The largest of Caral's pyramids, sometimes called the Great Pyramid, reveals layers of planning that imply advanced knowledge of engineering, organization, and labor management. Terraces rise in precise proportions, supported by retaining walls that have endured millennia of shifting sands, earthquakes, and seasonal flooding. Circular sunken plazas sit adjacent to the pyramids, spaces whose function remains debated. Were they centers for ritual, civic gathering, or astronomical observation? Evidence of flutes made from animal bones, large ceremonial amphorae, and remnants of early textiles and food offerings suggests that music, ceremony, and ritual feasting played a central role in these spaces. Could these rituals have connected the people to cycles of nature, to celestial movements, or to deities now lost to history? Caral's architecture demonstrates an awareness of spatial hierarchy and urban planning rarely seen in contemporaneous societies. The pyramids are not randomly positioned, but relate to plazas, residential sectors, and waterways, indicating a conscious effort to integrate the city into its surrounding environment. Yet, despite its sophistication, Caral lacked the fortifications common in many other ancient cities. There is little evidence of warfare or defensive walls, suggesting a society that prioritized religious, ceremonial, and civic expression over militarization. Could this peaceful orientation have been a factor in its eventual decline, leaving it vulnerable to environmental pressures or social fragmentation? The material culture found within and around the pyramids adds layers to the mystery. Remnants of cotton textiles, fishing nets, and elaborate ornaments indicate a mixed economy of agriculture, fishing, and trade. Corral's inhabitants cultivated cotton, maize, and beans, while also relying on marine resources from the nearby Pacific. Yet, there are no written records, no inscriptions to guide our understanding. We rely on the subtle traces of stone, bone, and artifact to interpret their beliefs and organization. What did the pyramids signify in a society without a script? How were cosmology, ritual, and governance encoded in the very stones themselves? Speculative theories offer further intrigue. Some researchers have proposed astronomical alignments embedded in Corral's urban design, suggesting that the pyramids and plazas were oriented to mark solstices or equinoxes. Others consider the pyramids as ceremonial centers linking elite and commoner populations, creating a spiritual axis for the city that harmonized social cohesion. Still more fringe interpretations suggest that the scale and precision of the step pyramids hint at knowledge or cultural transmission from unknown or external sources, though no direct evidence supports such claims. Regardless of explanation, the mystery of intent and meaning persists, inviting both caution and wonder. The collapse of Caral remains as enigmatic as its construction. By around 2000 BC, the city was largely abandoned, leaving terraces and pyramids to slowly sink into sand. There is little evidence of violent destruction, leading some to suggest environmental factors, river shifts, soil exhaustion, or climate change, as central causes. Yet, even as the city fell silent, its stone pyramids remained silent witnesses to a society whose complexity and vision challenge assumptions about the origins of urbanism in the Americas. Standing before the step pyramids today, one is struck by the sense of deliberate intent, by the rhythm of terraces, the alignment of plazas, and the echoes of ceremonial life long past. These structures are not only architectural feats, they are enduring questions, tangible remnants of human ambition, belief, and imagination. How did the people of Caral organize such monumental work without a written language? What stories, prayers, and knowledge were embodied in the pyramids' terraces and plazas, and how much remains forever beyond our grasp? The step pyramids of Caral remind us that the human drive to build, to organize, and to ritualize transcends geography and culture. In deserts thousands of miles from the great cities of the Old World, humans were shaping stone and adobe into forms that communicated meaning, hierarchy, and spirituality. And yet, like the vanished scripts of the Bronze Age, the full significance of these monuments eludes us, leaving only the stones, the plazas, and the whisper of human presence reaching across 4 millennia. As we trace the contours of Caral's pyramids and imagine the life that once thrived in this valley, we are left with an open question. What compelled these early builders to erect such enduring forms? And what truths about human ingenuity and belief remain hidden within the stones, waiting for discovery? Along the banks of the life-giving Nile, where the river widens and the desert meets the fertile floodplains, the ancient kingdom of Kush began to take shape. Centuries before the rise of the famous Napatan and Meroitic periods, Kush was a realm of mystery and promise, a land where the rhythms of the Nile dictated life, belief, and survival. From vast settlements to the towering pyramids of its later phases, the traces of early Kushite society hint at a sophisticated civilization whose full story remains elusive, concealed beneath sands, river silt, and the passage of time. Archaeological evidence suggests that Kushite society flourished contemporaneously with the great Bronze Age civilizations of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley. Its people established permanent settlements, developed agriculture, and cultivated trade networks that reached along the Nile and deep into Africa's interior. Yet, despite these achievements, Kush remains enigmatic. Unlike Egypt, whose monumental inscriptions and hieroglyphs allow us to reconstruct kingship, religion, and daily life, early Kush left behind far fewer records. What then can the stones, pottery, and burial sites tell us about this ancient kingdom? The cemeteries and early pyramids scattered across Nubia speak volumes without words. At sites such as Kerma, archaeologists uncover massive tumulus tombs and sophisticated mud brick structures, evidence of centralized authority and organized labor. These constructions suggest not only social hierarchy, but also a spiritual framework. Death and the afterlife were clearly of profound concern to the Kushites, yet the tombs themselves raise questions. Were they solely ceremonial, or did they serve as markers of political power, territorial claims, or astronomical alignment? The precision of some structures hints at knowledge of geometry and celestial cycles far beyond what one might expect from a civilization often overshadowed in history by its northern neighbor, Egypt. Kush's relationship with Egypt further deepens the mystery. For centuries, the two civilizations engaged in trade, diplomacy, and at times, conflict. Bronze, gold, ivory, and exotic woods flowed south and north, suggesting an interconnected world of material exchange and cultural interaction. Yet the nature of these connections remains partly speculative. Did Kushite artisans adapt Egyptian techniques, or did they develop independent traditions in metallurgy, ceramics, and textile production? Some evidence indicates that Kush was not merely a passive recipient of influence, but an active participant, contributing to the Bronze Age economy and technological landscape in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. The Nile itself shaped Kushite civilization in subtle and profound ways. Seasonal flooding created fertile fields, enabling surpluses that could sustain both large populations and ambitious construction projects. The river also acted as a highway, allowing movement of goods, ideas, and people. Could it have carried not only trade, but also religious concepts, cosmologies, or even migratory populations that influenced the development of Kush? And yet, despite these advantages, the kingdom's origins and early rise remain clouded in uncertainty. How did a civilization so strategically situated, so resource-rich, develop its unique identity alongside one of the most dominant empires of the Bronze Age? Artifacts recovered from early Kushite sites offer tantalizing glimpses of daily life and ritual, but also provoke more questions than they answer. Bronze tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects indicate skilled craftsmanship and metallurgical knowledge, raising queries about localer sources and technological transmission. Pottery and figurines reveal aesthetic preferences and spiritual expression, yet the symbolic language encoded within them remains largely undeciphered. What did these forms mean to the people who shaped and used them? Were they tools, status symbols, or sacred objects? Some speculative theories suggest that Kush may have played a more pivotal role in the Bronze Age than traditional narratives allow. Its position along trade routes connecting Central Africa with the Mediterranean implies a possible conduit for knowledge, materials, and cultural practices. Could Kush have influenced Bronze Age metallurgy, riverine engineering, or religious rituals beyond its borders? And if so, why does the historical record remain largely silent? The gaps in evidence challenge historians to look not only at what survives, but at the absences. The places where records, artifacts, or structures might have been lost to erosion, scavenging, or centuries of neglect. Environmental factors may also hold clues to the kingdom's evolution and challenges. Shifts in Nile flooding, regional climate fluctuations, or changing trade dynamics could have shaped settlement patterns, agricultural productivity, and political structures. Yet these natural pressures alone cannot explain the resilience and sophistication evident in early Kushite society. The interplay of environment, human ingenuity, and cultural ambition remains largely uncharted, leaving a story both partially visible and tantalizingly obscured. Standing among the remnants of Kushite settlements, one senses the echoes of a civilization that thrived in the shadows of more widely chronicled empires, a society that mastered the river and the land, yet chose to leave much of its narrative unwritten. The pyramids, tombs, and artifacts speak of authority, spirituality, and craftsmanship, yet they do so quietly, inviting speculation rather than offering certainty. What drove the rise of Kush during the Bronze Age, and how did it maintain its identity amid the forces of neighboring kingdoms and the challenges of the natural world? The enigmatic Kingdom of Kush reminds us that the Bronze Age was not a monolithic story of a few dominant powers, but a mosaic of interconnected and independent civilizations. As we study its pyramids and artifacts, its settlements and riverways, we are left with the enduring question: what truths about human ingenuity, adaptation, and belief remain hidden in the sands and along the Nile, waiting to reveal themselves to those who seek them?